Hi, this is Ken Jarecke, and today we're talking pictures with Karen Mullarkey. Karen Mullarkey is a living legend in our industry. If you don't know her, you don't know about publishing, editorial photography, or really the photography business in the United States in the 20th century and the 21st century. She she's been the director of photography at a number of magazines: Psychology Today, Rolling Stone, Newsweek, Sports Illustrated, and probably a couple others that I'm forgetting. She started her career at Life magazine at the ground floor and worked her way. Uh, she worked her way to the top until till Life itself died. So she knows more than me or the next 10 people that we're going to talk to about photography. So here she is, Karen.
Hi, Ken.
It's so great to have you here. I'm so excited to talk to you. Can you tell me about your time when you started out and you were still wearing white gloves and a hat to work?
Yes. I graduated from college in 1964. And when I went around University of Connecticut, and I had a dual major, history and political science. So I went around to get a job when I got out of college, and every job place I went, I was asked three questions. How fast do you type? How many words a minute can you take in dictation? And do you make good coffee, honey? And I only knew how to make coffee. So I had to go to a advanced secretarial class for 6 weeks for young ladies who had gone to college but had no skills, because we would only get a job. And in this class, which was kind of interesting, and you had two options. One was a school named Catherine Gibbs, and the other was Mary Byers. And they had almost exactly the same dress code. Now, this is 1964, so there was no pantyhose. So you had to wear a dress or a perfect sweater set. And the skirts were, of course, below your knee. You needed to wear stockings, which meant certain foundation garments that are no longer used. You, of course, had to have, full blah, 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 blah. You had to wear high heels. You had to wear white gloves. You had to carry a purse somewhat the way Queen Elizabeth does. And at Catherine Gibbs, you had to wear a hat, which you did not have to do at Mary Byers. And I'm not great in hats, so I decided Mary Byers. Now, the class that I went to was, part of it was college gals like me who had graduated no skills. And the other part were young women from high school who knew that they would never be more than an executive secretary because they had no college degree. And there was a lot of tension and resentment, which, at the time I didn't get, but now I do. But I was very driven and highly competitive. I had an older brother, and so I was doing dictation in front of the TV. And my dad helped me with the typing, and I would get to the point where I'd put a tie around my eyes so I could type correctly. And eventually those skills were extremely important. But after that, after I graduated in 6 weeks, I still failed every single job interview, every one. And finally, my father intervened, and I got a job with a custom cosmetics company. But I learned a certain skill. They were one of those places that you see now in Bloomingdale's, and they made up makeup for you. And they were the original one called Tourneur. And they had booths at like Marshall Field's in Chicago, Kaufman's, all the big department stores. And I wound up having to kind of handle women who worked at particular stores who were highly competitive because that's how they made extra money. And they were fighting and trying to kill each other all the time. And one of the jobs I had to learn how to do was to wrangle cats, in a sense, right? And keep everybody calm, listen, be understanding, and learn how to be very firm. I want you to know that this was extraordinarily great practice for later on in my career, when I had to do sort of the same thing with photographers in bureaus and whatever. But that's where I learned how to get people in a way to do what I wanted them to do, and make them realize it was actually their idea. So these are certain skills that you learn in life, right? Which through life get refined, and they work really, really well. And so I look upon all of that, and the fact that I knew how to take dictation meant that when I was working for Mr. Pollard at Life, and he'd have me in the bedroom when he was cutting deals with the Associated Press or anybody, I would write everything down like a court stenographer. And that's how
tell me how you got through the door at 1271.
Oh, well, that was, here I am. I'm working downtown in what is now fashionable NoHo, and trust me, in those days it was not. I'm in a warehouse, and one of the young women that I grew up with in Darien, Connecticut, la-di-da, and shown as Kathy, but after graduating, she changed to Maria. And her father was a big deal at Sports Illustrated. Might have been the publisher. Anyway, I saw her at some event and wanted to know where I was working, and I told her, and she looked at me like aghast and said, Karen, girls from Darien don't work down there. You need to come work at Time Inc. I'll set it up. But I had the secretarial skills, so I got into 1271 as a secretary to 2 ad salesmen at Fortune. And it's, you know, it was, everybody used to ask me if I had ever watched Mad Men, the TV show. And I said, no, I did it because I lived Mad Men. I didn't have to watch it. So, but I learned how to manage a lot of business. And these guys, like all of them, used to like to get real drunk go out for lunches on Friday that ended on Monday. And I got into the point where I said to them, you know, you don't have to worry, I'll do your business for you. And it'll get to the point where your clients would just as soon talk to me as you. And then I said, and I'll show you how good I can be at this, because by this time I kind of knew what I was doing. And I learned that if you don't speak up for yourself, nothing will happen. So I said, so here's the deal. Every 6 months, though, you have to give me a raise. And the 6th point you don't is the day I'm out of here. So this happened, and every 6 months. And I had gotten to be friends with the man who was the first African-American vice president at Time Inc. And he was a lovely guy. And, you know, halfway through this, I'll think of his name. But finally, these guys forgot the 6-month thing. And I said, well, I'm gone. And I had Mr. Trent, his name was Robert Trent Jr., I think. Anyway, I called him, and he knew what I was doing, and he knew I'd set that criteria. He thought that was pretty clever. And he's the reason I got to Mr. Pollard's office, Richard O. Pollard, photography at Life magazine. And, and he was looking for a secretary to type and take dictation. He already had one secretary, an English woman named Ann Drayton. A little bit of a thing, and she was, I'm telling you, nobody got in his office. Nobody. Eugene Smith could not get past her. And she was so polite and so British, right? But she didn't have any of those skills. So I get hired to do that. I'm really the second secretary. And when they first hired me, they put me, the office was configured a certain way, and I was sort of in this center area that was kind of, I don't know, somebody important used to be there because it had walls. And the photographers would look by and look at me wondering, where on the totem pole did I fit? Because I was in this walls. I was not out. So I was a specimen. And that's where I also met Bobby Baker. Baker Burroughs became the longest tenured photo editor at Life. But it was Bobby and I, and they set it up, and they saw our desks faced each other. And we were called Pollard's girls. So I began to type everything. He'd leave me, you know, I'd be out late at night with Epperidge or all these people, but I would get there, and he liked to go home early. So suddenly he would just have brown paper where he was going to say the name of the person, like Hal Buell, who was the head of AP. and 4 things that he wanted to get through, and I'd write the letter. And then when he would make a contract deal, I'd be in the back, and I would. So they all got used to seeing me, and he loved.
So you learned from Pollard. You learned the business side.
I learned everything from Pollard.
Well, but first you learned the business side, but at some point.
Oh, so here's how that happens.
Right.
So I'm really efficient, and he loves that part. And I'm funny, and he likes that part. And he loves Bobby because we're always in trouble. And she was extremely efficient too. I mean, we were low level, and we were right. And I was very tall, and she was very short, and we wore, mini skirts, and we were like the Mutt and Jeff. So one day he comes out to me and he says, "Are you happy?" And out of my mouth came, "I could be happier." And he said, "Really? Doing what?" And I said, "Anything you'd take the time to teach me." He knew I already understood the contract. He basically wanted to teach me the business first. Now he wanted to see if I had an eye. So in those days, there's no computers, okay? Nothing like that. Everything's done on manual typewriters. And there was in a library in the old days, used to be a card catalog, right? 3x5 cards. Well, that's what they had for the photographers who were staff photographers. And you would pull out these card catalogs, and there were little 3x5 cards, okay? And so under an E, there would be Mr. Eisenstadt. And he'd have a stack of cards, like that thick. And every set number was there. And it's complicated, but if you were doing a job for life in those days, every job had its unique set number. And these carbon things that were just huge, right? And the different sheets went to different places. It was craziness, okay? So it was what it was, and we learned a lot of stuff. And so he goes in this box, and he pulls out somebody's name, and he writes down a set number on his hand. And then after it, there's a T and a number. That's how many it takes. He said, "Okay, come with me." We walked the entire length of the 29th floor timeline, go around a corner, and he opens a door. And there's a room, it's at least 9x12. And it's filled with the yellow bags, right, that Kodachrome or Ektachrome boxes in it. And the set number would be on the outside. And nothing was sorted. In other words, we walked in the door, you just tossed it. And these were the rejects. This film had been through Peggy Sargent, Peggy Sargent was the head photo editor, and she had a team that was great. Then that film, that's what she would pick and show, and that's what they would base the pictures they would choose for the magazine from that edit. Then everything went down to the picture collection. And they went through all of it. And then what wasn't picked, put in the boxes, put in the bags, and thrown in the room. So he said, "I want you to find, there's 10 takes or whatever. Here's the number, write it down, bring all the bags back." And I would do that, and then I put them on the light box. I do. So I come back, and he says to me, "This material is the reject. But in among these rocks are pearls. And if you've got any eye, they will jump out and bite you. Pull them. And keep them by take, because obviously the one bag would be labeled the number plus take 1. Then there'd be a bag for take 2. Pull them and organize them by take. And stack them and come and get me when you're done." Now, meanwhile, you have to understand, I'm still doing all the typing. I'm still doing all the dictation. I'm also preparing all the pictures for syndication that have to be shipped to Paris, all the prints, and I'm learning how to get prints out of the darkroom. Whatever I was told to do, I did. No whining. And
okay, so let me just jump in there for a sec. You, the thing that I'm seeing, you never said no. You took anything that was offered. And
Oh,
you can probably say that about every great photographer you've ever worked with. You just,
absolutely.
but
There's no whining about, you know what, Bill, Bill had a great line. Adults don't whine, they just turn in the film. Well, I mean, don't forget, here I am finally getting a break and the chance to maybe not be a secretary. But but at the same time, I better be the most crackerjack secretary he had. Because right at that moment, that's how I was proving myself to him, that I could do anything he set before me. So basically, I have this particular event now by my choices. He comes out and he looks through the box, what I've set aside. This is good. He goes, okay, now I want you to make a picture story out of what you've selected here. And he says to me, every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I said, could I see the captions? And he said, oh, no, you don't need the captions. I said, because the whole point, as I told you, is you only want to pick pictures that elicit something from you. They either make you curious, they make you angry, they make you want to laugh. They have to touch you in some way. And just make up the backstory. You know what a backstory is? And I was like, no. He said, oh, any actor who has to play a part already invents the story that led to the character they're playing. They have to make up the backstory. So make up a story.
okay. So sorry to,
no, it's okay. I'm sorry. I rattle on too much.
well, I just want to know how, over the next 50 years, after you learned about pictures that move you, pictures that grab you, pictures that tell a story, how did your approach change over the next 50 years?
It basically didn't.
Exactly.
To tell you the truth, it didn't. Yeah. No, and so I passed that test a couple of times, and then he decided that he would give me to photographers. And he gave me to Gordon Parks. I said, the kid's doing pretty good. So Gordon had me sit me down with black and white contact sheet, and an extra contact. He'd already edited his, and he did the same thing. And I once again said, because he wanted me to pick the pictures from the contact sheet, which is a very different way of looking at material, really, than the color. Because in the contact sheets, the color will kind of grab you, right? The black and white, you really need to look, he taught me, full frame, and look for those little small things in the composition that make the picture because you're going to look at 4 or 5 kind of like it, but they're not all the same. You want to look for that one thing that makes the picture's composition perfect. And I would mark a contact sheet. And of course, said, can I read the captions? And he goes, the same thing. No, you don't need the captions. And then I would mark the contact sheet, and he would then bring out the one he had done, and he would show, some of them I got right. I matched him, I was very happy. And the ones that didn't, he would show me the difference in his choice from mine. And that's when he taught me to look at the smallest detail in the photograph, because it's the smallest detail that actually oftentimes makes the picture better than the one next to it. Be the angle of that, so it makes a better diagonal. You know what I mean? He taught me those things, and I began to refine how I looked at pictures. And then, he would send me over to the, it had a studio, fabulous studio. That's where all the great dinners and the science pictures. And I would go with a notebook, because he said, write down all your questions and speak only when spoken to. And I got to see some great, like Fritz Goro and stuff, but also the great dinners. And then the photographers also taught me something extremely important, which was how to make a good martini for them. And but whatever they, and I wrote down all my questions. And then I'd come back and Pollard, and they always see there was an ice machine on every floor. It was like the Easy 8 Motel, and every department had a full bar. And usually around 5 o'clock, I took off my secretarial hat and put on my bartender hat, and I would make drinks, or Barbara would do it. She'd make drinks, and that was just standard. So he would have the photographer that I worked with. He'd ask who it was, and he'd buzz them and ask them if they wanted to have a drink with him. And then they'd fly up those stairs. And then he'd say, was Karen with? Oh, yeah, she's great. She never speaks unless I speak to her, and she writes shit down all the time. So he would say, yeah, she has some questions. I want you to tell her the exact answer. And this went on for some time. And one of them finally said, I don't want to tell her that. Why do I have to tell her that? And Pollard said, because one of these days you're going to work for her. And when he said that, you could have hit me with a feather. I would have fallen down. But then I realized he'd been training me. He trained me for the business side, and he was training me for the looking side. And he saw something in me that I didn't see at the time, but I realized his mentorship is the reason I sit before you today. And then he gave me to Ralph Morse, who was Mr. Astronaut, and sent me down there with Ralph. I could drive. You see, no one else there could drive, so I could drive the film to Orlando from Cape Kennedy. Although then it was Cape Canaveral. And the next thing I know, I'm organizing Life's entire Apollo coverage with the goal of Apollo 11 going to the moon. And I shot at the VIP side. Tommy DeLestro from AP taught me how to read negatives, black and white negatives. I mean, I was just so lucky, and yet I worked so hard. I ran the teletype machine there. I got all the rooms. I got all the cars. I kept wives separate from lovers. I arranged the dinners. The only thing I couldn't do was keep James Dickey and Norman Mailer sober. I could not pull that one off. But other than that, everything. I hid Mrs. Armstrong and the kids. They were not on the base on Cape Kennedy when the liftoff took place. They were on a boat that I'd arranged for. And I put them in it's a story, you know. I reserved a house 6 months before liftoff under the guise that we were going to make executive in there who'd had a breakdown, and we were going to dry him out, and he was going to get personal care. And I cleared this with George Hunt, and it was his big boat that I arranged to have come up and get them. I told Mrs. Armstrong she couldn't have been happier. She hated all those people in her face. So she was on the boat with the kids. And I had photographers everywhere. And by then, I was giving out the orders. And I told Phil Kuhnhart and Loudon Wainwright if they weren't at the plane T+20 after liftoff, I was leaving them.
Well, because you had a deadline. You were.
I had a deadline, and the film had to get up before some VIP person shut down the airport.
Well, wasn't the vice president there? The vice president
might have been the vice president.
Yeah, you had to get your plane. You had a 727 at that point.
Oh, something like that. I mean, yeah, okay. Something we had rented, some kind of jet. I don't think it was as big as the 727. I think it was more of a smaller private jet, because we weren't going to process on the plane.
Right.
It was not like it was not like when they did the coronation or something like that, in which they actually processed the film on the plane coming back from England.
No, like for Churchill's funeral, you processed and printed on the plane coming back.
That's right. All those big things like that. But I was not doing that. Mine strictly was the astronauts, and so I'd been to every launch. And, got to know Walter Cronkite, who was such a sweet man. And, all these people I knew or, wrangled or whatever. And the photographers by that time, if I said, dude, jump, they just wanted to know how high. And they were great that way. They were wonderful.
But tell me what would have happened. What would have happened if the vice president's plane would have got on the runway before your plane?
It would have been screwed. I'm sorry. I would have been held. You can't get in that airspace. You can't do that. I mean, it's not as strict then as it is now. I would never have been able to even get up in the air until he left. But that's why I set what I did, because
What
I
would have
knew,
happened to you, and what would have happened to the magazine?
I would have been, I could have lost my job. That's how I saw it. My job was to not let that happen, which is why I told Phil Kuhnhart, assistant managing editor, and Loudon Wainwright, the great writer, if you're not at the plane, you have this many minutes to get from wherever you're going to watch it to the plane. If you miss that, I'm leaving you on the ground, and I'll help you find a regular flight. I went and picked up a film. My guys had to be in certain spots right after. In my job, I'm right there at liftoff. I'm prepared to take a cassette of film that's bore-sided. I'm going to steal it and leave a blank. I mean, I knew what I would do if it blew up. But then my job was, they would be in a precise location after liftoff, and I would go and grab the film and kept moving to the airport. Mrs. Armstrong, they lowered a bucket from a helicopter. Vernon Merritt was on the boat, and that's how the film was collected, and the chopper went right to the airport. So by the time I'm there, I've got everything. I've already bagged it by their names. I've got all that done. I've got the list of set numbers. I'm not going on the plane, but so they can know what set numbers, but I've already put that on the outside of the envelope, and I've got it on the plane, and I see running, and they got 2 friggin' minutes. I see Loudon and Phil, and Loudon was a big man, and they're just sweating and running, and they actually get to the stairs 2 minutes prior to liftoff, and I said, well done. And Loudon goes, you would have left us? I said, oh, absolutely. I would have helped you get home, but I would never hold the plane. And plane off. And later that day, I got a telex telling me it was one of the best, a brilliant job, beautifully done, congratulations, best ever organization. My trains ran on time. And that's why Annie used to call me Choo-Choo, because my trains ran on time, like hers.
So let me just.
When I was, okay, sorry.
Well, before we jump ahead to say Annie, let's talk. Just can we go back and can you tell me about Pinky, because I've never heard about Pinky, and I just assumed all this time that you and Bobby were kind of Barbara Baker Burroughs.
Oh, we were inseparable.
But you guys, but there was a picture editor before there, a woman picture editor before you two.
Well, but I was never a picture editor. I was a secretary. Barbara was the either the because that would be the ones you would type of, or the OA girl, which meant it was on approval. So any freelancer who came in, who dropped off film, or even if you were a freelancer and we gave you an assignment, you got an OA number because you were not on contract and you were not a staff photographer. So Barbara, that's what Barbara's doing. She would do everything. And also they would come, all the agencies would come. RAFO, Black Star, they would come and they'd go to this one woman and she would look at stuff, and Barbara would, if they were going to keep it. There was another woman who did, Ruth Lester, who did nothing but the miscellany page, which was either overweight brides or cats drinking out of toilet bowls, right? It was just, and that's all she did. So it was very compartmental, but I was never a photo editor at Life in those days, and neither was Barbara. But Barbara, I went off to explore every 5 years I would get bored. So I had to change. I just needed a variety in life. Barbara was structured differently. She never left Life, and she worked her way up to being, the big cheese there. And she knew everybody, Izzy, she took care of Izzy, So our paths crossed, but we were like this, right? We did everything together. We even waitressed together to supplement our income, right? And we got in a lot of trouble together. Not bad trouble, just, we would put on costumes and be in shows that were put on. It just, it's just funny. I mean, we laugh about it now. Barbara wanted to be a rockette. She was too short. I wanted to be a stewardess. I was too tall. You know what I mean? We were just, and then I'll tell you something else. Years would go by. We wouldn't see each other. We'd see each other sit down. It was like nothing had passed. And it was like that right up to the time she died. So, we were very lucky. But I was trained at life. I was trained by some of the best photographers at life. But mostly I was trained by Dick Pollard. And he trained Barbara too. Okay? If she were alive, she would tell you that.
Well, it seems like you made a lot of your own luck too.
Oh, you know how you make luck? You just are smart enough to see, if you go knock on if you can get your foot in the door, you're in the building. Do you know what I mean? It's like the fuller brush salesman. If you can get your foot in the door, the chances are you're going to make the sale. Well, that's what luck is about, I think. I think luck comes from hard work and commitment and refusal you'll accept being pushed back, but you get back up. Just have to look at a baby. This is what I tell photographers, the ones I'm teaching now. Look around. Do you ever see a baby get up and run? It doesn't work that way. A baby gets up and falls down when it's trying to learn how to stand up and walk. And the one thing you can see a baby do, it just keeps getting up until it's mastered it. That's, to me, the story of life. And so for my job and what I learned, it's not like it all went well. I mean, I was promised a big job when I got back from the astronauts, and that I was going to be made a reporter, and I was going to be this, and I didn't have to go through the usual rigmarole. And I got back to find out another young woman had been given that because she was sleeping with the editor. And that, to me, was it. And I left.
So tell me how you ended up in LA.
Well, I ended up in LA. That's how I ended up. I also had broken one of Pollard's rules, which is you cannot date involved with any of the photographers. Well, I kind of broke that rule.
Which photographer?
Well, he's passed away, so I guess I can say.
Yeah, it's okay.
Vernon Merritt.
Okay.
And he was married, of course, which has always made life a little more complicated. But in those days, I wasn't as judicious as I would be now. But we were crazy about each other. And I went to LA, and Pollard knew that's why I'd gone. And he waited until I was there about 6 months, and then he brought Vernon to New York. And that's when I called him and I said, I'll come back to New York, Dick. I'll do anything. I'll work in the lab. I'll sleeve the negatives. Just let me come back. And that's when he said to me, I'm going to tell you something. 2 reasons you can't come back. 1, this magazine's going to fold in about 18 months. I said, you're kidding me. He said, no, it's going to fold. 2, here's the real reason you can't come back. You don't go back in life, you just go forward. And I don't care if it's a mistake, whatever. You just go forward. And I have made a number of mistakes in my life. But the truth is, you can't go back. The whole point of life is to go forward. And the other thing he said to me was, the thing about life is, don't you, living. He goes, there's no dress rehearsal. So whatever's going on today is it's it. There's no dress rehearsal. These have become really important things in my life. And then going to California, I wound up there in the beginning, sometime early 70s. And, I worked for a dreadful person and got out of that. And he helped me find me a job, which is how I got down to La Jolla, San Diego for Psychology Today. And then I became a hippie chick. Lived in a commune. You know what I mean? I was one of those. Here's the story, Kenny. I'm going to be 77, and I will never, ever say, gee, I wish I had.
No, I mean, you've lived a life.
I have lived a great life. And, I made some decisions You know, I didn't get married. I had some wonderful boyfriends, but I never got married. Partly because I'm a child of the 50s, and men in those days thought you should stay home and bake and cook, you know, and have kids. And I learned at a fairly early age I was not going to be able to have children. So then I couldn't figure out why I would get married. Just quite confused. And then, you know, if I was traveling around with photographers, some of the guys who I dated who were not in that business could not believe that I wasn't going to go off the reservation with them while I was on the road. And the fact of the matter is, I knew that wasn't going to happen, but they didn't, because they were, of course, playing their role if they were me. So, you know, so I made some choices. Some of, you know, it wasn't always easy, but I don't regret any of the choices.
Let me ask you about, you know, psychology today was it wasn't a huge part of your career, but you learned something important there that you didn't really pick up at life, which was how to illustrate things that aren't really photographable.
Right. Well, or how to make photo illustration. And I had a brilliant art director who had a great imagination. And I lived with one of the photographers. There were 3 photographers. And we did, and we started in a commune called, this will tell you the times, Eyeball. Anyway, it was wonderful. But I would meet him once a month. I mean, I started out working at the magazine, and then finally, you know, I did what I was doing, producing stuff and doing all the credits and working with the writers. But, you know, the writers were basically in the academic world where it's publish or perish, right? So that getting manuscripts was easy. Finding a way to illustrate these kinds of concepts is not. But Tom Gould, Gould, brilliant. He had an offbeat sense of humor. And so we would meet once a month at a bar across the street, because this was all in Del Mar and La Jolla, little times that we worked, because there was not one big place. I mean, the accounting department was in Cardiff, right? We were in Del Mar. This was over here. So what happens is we would meet, and he had already sketched out some ideas. And we would talk about the gist of the story and what he thought. And he would kind of put them on cocktail napkins at a place called Bullies. They had the best ribs. And then we would make this joke that had one of those smiley faces. And whoever could come up with the most obscene drawing was not going to pay, except he always paid. And, you know, I used to surf there. We used to go surfing across the street. So anyway, and then at the end of the month, I would bring those cocktail napkins to life. And that meant that I would go out on the street and I would cast people on the street. I would find real people. I still have the old Polaroid. I could show you my Polaroid with the bellows. That's what was in the roll film. And I'd go out and find people on the street who I knew fit what it was we were doing. I didn't want models. I wanted real people. And I would build the sets. And I would make sculptures. It really tapped into a whole other aspect in my brain. And it also made me understand how to create an image that wasn't going to be journalism per se, but had to really come through. I'll give you an example. We were doing a thing on IQ. So I went out to the desert, Tom and I had, and I had huge blocks. And at night, they built the initials IQ. We were way out in the desert, out by Joshua Tree. And then during the day, as the sun came up, we photographed it until it had all melted in various stages. The myth of the IQ. And so that ran as a series of pictures. Well, that was such a clever idea. And he and I would work on ideas, Tom and I. And so it made my brain, it taught me something. So that when I would be running say I'm working with Doug Kirkland or at New York Magazine and I'm having to come up with concepts for covers. My brain had been exposed to that kind of an idea, how to do that. So each one of these things was a piece of my jigsaw puzzle that formed all the things I did, which was eventually when I'm making films, I knew how to think of the pieces that make a film happen, right? So I'm just, I was and because I didn't want to get married, I didn't want to do anything but follow the path of my career. And then when Psychology Today was bought by Ziff Davis, and there we were. We literally would surf almost every day, kept our boards there. We'd go across the street. We'd get an avocado and a can of tuna, and we'd surf for lunch and come back. And it was the 70s, so we'd all take our clothes off and just hose each other down. It was all fine. I put on my little surfer flip-flops and just drop a Lily Pulitzer dress on, and the guys would just pull up a pair of, surfer shorts, and we'd go to work. And the guys from Ziff Davis came and they had bought it, and they knew the most important part was the art. So Tom asked us if we wanted to, and they said, well, the guys came in their suits. And this is how I get to Rolling Stone. And the guys are in their suits, and they talk to us, and they tell us how they're going to, if we go to New York, they'll make us famous. Already won every single award in the Art Directors Club, New York. And we always sent an ad guide. So we looked at each other, and we're just 5 or 6 of us in there, and he goes, okay, now everybody put your head down on your desk, no peeking. So Tom, he goes, okay, everybody who'd like to go to New York and be famous, raise your hand. Now these guys, first of all, when the suits arrived, we had just come back from swimming, and we stripped down naked, and we're washing each other and just carrying out like little children. Nobody paid attention. And then these guys in the suits were just like dumbstruck. And then we go, okay, everybody put your head down on your desk, no peeking. All of you who would like to go to New York and be famous, raise your hand. Okay, keep your head down. Okay, all of you who'd like to go back and catch that north swell, raise your hand. The guy, he turned to the suits, he goes, well, I guess that's it. They don't want to go be famous. They'd rather go surfing. Okay, guys, you can go out for another 35 minutes, then come back. We have work to do. We all got up, grabbed our stuff, changed back into our suits, stripped all our clothes off, put our suits back on, and went and surfed. And that was it. And now I had no work. So I had to figure that out. I was doing work for Magnum guys who were doing commercial work because I could find locations, it was beautiful in San Diego. And then I drove up, stopped off at Rolling Stone, and a new chapter opens.
If Rolling Stone, that's a perfect storm for you, Rolling Stone. It's almost like it was created with you in mind.
Particularly at that time frame. Okay, so we're talking 1974. And I drive up, I have a 55 VW with the little things that come out, right, left, right turn on the side, straight across windshield. No heat, and no gas gauge either. It just had a
dipstick.
Well, no, it had a wrench thing. What's that called? Allen wrench, like you have to put everything together at IKEA. Well, that was, and right next to the gas pedal, if it went, you stuck your foot on that, flipped it over, you had another gallon, which was 30 some odd miles. And the only thing you had to remember is the red light was not dangerous, even though you thought it would be. The green light stopped the car immediately because the oil's screwed and the car will blow up. But it had a rebuilt 65 engine in it. So everybody thought, oh, we can drag race with her. But that was not a good idea. So I go up there to Rolling Stone because I've got a boyfriend who's a painter up in outside of Garberville, marijuana capital of America. And I'm going to go up and see Borthwick and spend some time with him. And but you have to break that trip because that's a long drive. So I had cousins in in Berkeley, and so I I think, well, and I knew some commercial photographers up there because they'd called me and I'd done location work. Anyway, so I stop off at Rolling Stone and I say, and the receptionist, who later became a really dear friend, I said to her, I'm here. I don't know if you need a job. I'm a picture editor. And she said, oh, hold on. So they have a person come out of the art department or wherever, and they said, well, how do I know you can edit pictures? I said, well, why don't you do this? Give me a contact sheet, and I need one of those handheld loops with a light, thank you, and a grease pencil, and I'll mark it up for you, and then I'll leave it with you. But that's all the time I have, because I'm headed up to Garberville, and of course they all knew what Garberville was. I said I headed up to Garberville, so I can drop it off, and then on my way back, I said, I have a boyfriend up there. He's a painter, great painter. And when on my way back, I'll stop in and see how things are going. What do you think? So I do. That's exactly what I do. And I go up to Garberville. I go to Garberville, and even further out where Baldo was, and I go out to Cremo Ranch, which is what we called it, and hang there for, 3 weeks or something. And I come back through. I stop off at Rolling Stone. The same person comes out and says, you do know how to edit. I said, oh yeah, I do. So they show me around, and they had a black and white lab, and there was a guy became a pretty famous photographer named Max Hellwig, and then he added Aguilera, and then he became a psychiatrist. I mean, it was just perfect. But at the time, Max was Annie's assistant, which meant he would, whatever. And there's a little sink, and the water's running. And under the sink is a box, and in that box are Annie's negatives. And the water is running all the time. And I stumble on, I kick it by mistake, and I say, what's that? And he goes, oh, those are Annie's negs. And I said, really? Now, don't forget, I've now been trained at life. I said, under the sink? Oh, yeah. I thought, why there? And he goes, well, it's so easy to get to them. Meanwhile, they had a fireproof safe that was filled with nothing but 810 glossies that were sent by the record companies and her negatives. And I'm thinking, right? But I go back home down to the San Diego area, and I get a phone call. And, I said to the guy from the art department, this is a mess. This is a real mess here. You need a firm hand. But I'm heading back down to the commune I'm living in, basically. I'm living in a place called Normal Heights. Is that not perfect? Actually, we had a sign across the road, and it said, welcome to Normal Heights. And that's where I lived. It's so funny. So anyway, I get a phone call, basically, and it's from Jan, and basically he has an idea, and the idea is that I would come up there, and we would work a long weekend, and he and Annie and I would clean everything up in there.
So just let me just to be clear, we're talking about Jan Wenner and Annie Leibovitz.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, we're talking about Jan Wenner and Annie. But when I went to up there, I did not meet Annie then. I didn't meet anybody then. But the word had obviously gotten back to Jan that I'd been there, I knew how to edit, and this was my background, that I came from life, right? That was impressive. And
You were kind of the adult at that point.
Yes, I was one of the few adults in the room. Sir Black, who had been hired in the art department as the associate art director. And then what happened is, we know there was a certain attrition of people. Tony Lane was, but he had some issues. He kind of just melted away. And anyway, I get this phone call. I haven't met Roger either. I don't know if Roger was even there. Oh dear, I lost you. Oh, there you are. I'm so sorry. I touched something on my desk. I won't do that. I'm moving. You know how I am. I don't know any of this stuff. So anyway, I basically get a phone call, and he tells me this idea he has that he and Annie and I over a long weekend can clean up the mess that's in there. And I basically say to him, well, that's an interesting idea. And I have an idea too that might work. It probably is just as successful. And he said, what's that? And I said, oh, I think we should put 3 elephants in there and close the door. And then in 4 days come back, and I think the same amount of shit will be on the floor as if you and I and Annie did it. And got very quiet. He was not amused. But I said to him, look, here's the deal. You know, I was trained at life, blah, blah, blah. And I said, you know, if I were to come up there, I'm going to have to be my way or not. And I can understand why that would not be what you want. But that's the only way I'll do it. And you have a big problem up there. And I hadn't even done enough research on Annie to realize how big a problem there was. So I, not with her work, but with her lifestyle at that time. So I hung up and da-da-da, and about 4 days later, he gets back to me and he says, okay, but he was not happy. We never were close. First of all, at that point, I'm 6 feet. He is anything but. I was the same height as Annie. We were nose to nose. We were the same height. It was perfect.
How'd you and Annie hit it off when you?
Well, you know, it was interesting because when I finally got the job and came up there, she was in South Africa photographing Arnold Schwarzenegger for the last of his Mr. Olympia things. This is when, what's his name, Butler was making the film. And so Annie was down there. There was a writer named Abe Peck who was there. The woman who was one of the photo editors, who was Abe Peck's girlfriend, was there. And of course, she changed allegiances to Arnold because Arnold was so randy. And so, but Annie is taking these pictures, and I have yet to meet her. So, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, I hope she photographs him like a piece of meat. It'd be perfect because that's what he's pretending. You know, that's what he's all about, right? My biceps, my this, my that. So, but I think to myself, you know, she knows I've been hired, but I'm not going to stop her on the phone. If she hadn't left, we would have that conversation in person. But that's not a way to meet her. I don't want to. That's not the impression I want to leave with her. That I'm calling her up to tell her what to do. I knew enough that wasn't. It's never a smart way to start out with somebody who's as talented as that. So I waited till she came back, and I looked at the film, and of course she's done just that. And I'm thrilled. Now, they don't run the pictures well in the magazine, but man, she nailed it. And the guy who went on to play the Hulk they were both in, there's that great shot of the two of them in bed in their underwear. And, you know, it just was spectacular. So, you know, we kind of appreciating her talent. She's me because she knows I've got this Life magazine training. And Annie did not have great technical skills at that time. She was brilliant. Her eye, what she sees, how she sees is brilliant, brilliant. She hates standing where other people are. She doesn't see like other people. I mean, there are other photographers I've encountered who remind me of that. And we'll get into that, which is the fellow who took the picture over your head. And I admired that gift. But she shot all triacs. Pretty much we always shot black and white because we were printing on toilet paper, right? So color was, you just didn't do a lot of it. So, but she always shot at 1600 on triacs. And this was stunning to me because Life photographers would no more shoot at 1600, right? Because the other guys were, unless they were in a coal mine, right? And they only had the little lamp for light. This would never be what they wouldn't even think of it. They would know how to shoot it normal or how to get additional light. You know what I mean? They were so fabulously trained. And many of them had started as assistants and then graduated. Johnny Iacona was an assistant. These guys who went on to be brilliant at Sports Illustrated. So I kept wondering why she did that. And then one day, I'd been there a little bit, I said to her, why do you shoot the black and white at 1600? I don't understand. And she does this thing when she's nervous. I watch her hand go through her hair. I know you've seen this. She goes, well, she said this, well, that's my style. That's who I am. That's my style. Why do you ask? Why do you ask? And we're standing, I'm facing, we're the same height. I said, really? Oh, that's so interesting. I said, you know why I thought you did it? Because I thought you didn't know how to shoot it at normal. That's what I was thinking. Whoa, right? But I could see that she's ready to, bite me. And I took that risk, and I said to her, look, do me a favor. How about this? Don't speak right now, because I know you won't like to bite me and go crazy. And then there's always that part where you have to apologize for stuff like that. So how about this? I'm going to make you an offer. And here's the offer. I will hire assistants, which, by the way, you can eat them as many as you want and spit them out. But you're going to watch what they do, and they'll know how to lie, and you don't. And you'll learn from them, and you can just absorb it. And you don't have to let on that you're learning, but their job, that's what they're going to do for you. And when you've mastered that, then you won't have to shoot everything at 1600, and that'll give you greater flexibility and freedom. You don't have to worry. You get that out of the worry box. And then here's what you're going to do for me. You're going to teach me to see better. And that's, what do you think? I think that's a really good deal. So why don't you go think about that? Don't speak. So we don't have to do any apology stuff, because if you get nasty with me, I'll get nasty with you. So let's do that and think about it and come back. And that's exactly how she came back and said, I think it's a good deal. I said, so do I. Because seeing better is important for me, and I will learn because you see differently than most of the people I've worked with. And that'll be terrific for me. And that's the whole game, isn't it? Teaching and learning at the same time. And we shook hands, and we never fought again. Ever. One thing, and it was funny. The other thing was, there was a picture I kept of her when she was doing Jimmy Carter, and she'd gone to the church, right? And she was squatting down, taking pictures, and I could see her in the bumper of this Cadillac or whatever, big chrome stuff, right? And I had a big print made, and I put it over my desk. And she came in, I don't understand why you have that picture. I hate that picture. Why do you have that picture? I said, you know why I have that picture up there? Because I can see you in the bumper, and I know you're working. And it makes me so happy. And years later, I go to a show. I mean, I've left there, whatever. It's a big show. I get off the elevator at the gallery, and there this huge print is, that very photograph. Huge. As you walk on, opening picture for the show. I looked at that because she was on my ass about that forever. So I waited. I went around. Of course, it's like bees all around. It's just flower. They're just everybody. Blah, 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 blah. I wait until she catches I catch her eye, and I'm just standing off to the side. And finally, she and I make our way to each other. I said, oh, can you imagine how happy? Wow, that picture as we got off the elevator. Where did that come from? Do I remember seeing that before? She said, okay, Choo-Choo, okay, you're right. You were right. I said, of course I was right. And we just laughed, But that was the only other time she ever got cranky with me, was over that picture. But that was it. And we stayed friends. I mean, I don't see her very much because she lives in a different planet than I do. But when we do see each other, it's always very cordial. And I learned a lot from Annie. I learned a lot, and really about how to see differently. And therefore, if I was going to be hiring photographers, I wanted to find ones who didn't like standing in the line. next to each other. I wanted to hire photographers who also had their own vision, like their own voice. And I learned that from her. And I learned to really appreciate that. I know it was around me at life, but I wasn't sophisticated enough in the business to understand that until later when I looked back and I could see the really great ones had a very specific ethos, design, sense of composition. And that's what I learned to look for. And I credit Annie for that. And I also credit her because we were crazy. And goddamn, we had a lot of fun and we were out of control. But that whole period, everybody was out of control. So, you know, I never have to say, gee, I wish I did. I wish I'd done. And so I think to myself, well, I'm still standing. Other people aren't. So that's what Annie gave me. And then that's where I met Roger Black. He became the art director. And we were a team after that for maybe almost 20 years.
So about the same time, maybe a year after you started working with Annie, you worked with Avedon on a project.
Yes. Avedon, this was certainly not my idea. It was Jan. Jan had great ideas. He was difficult, but he was smart. And so you always have to give the devil his due. And he was very clever. And I think because Annie and I got so tight that he was not used to sharing her was another reason to not be fond of me. And I, of course, have to admit my piece of it, which was I was arrogant. I was arrogant in those days, but, you know, we did a lot of drugs. That'll make you really stupid. And I just was arrogant. And those are things you do that are mistakes. You can't go back, but you can only go forward. And eventually you learn to jettison that. But it's what it was at that time. And we all did so much cocaine and we all thought it made us smart. I know Annie thought that. I thought that. You know, you get so cuckoo, you think you could do it in front of a cop, everything would be fine. So it's what it was at the time. And it wasn't just Rolling Stone that was doing it. It was in the movie business. It was everywhere. So, you know, so it's 1970.
Jan had this idea about the family, I guess is what the project.
Well, it was 1976. It was the anniversary, 200 years of America. And Jan came up with a brilliant idea. And I think he discussed it with I don't know if it was Avedon's idea or Jan's. I wouldn't know that. I was not privy. And I knew that Jan was hanging out with, you know, all sorts of high-end people. And that's why he wanted eventually to go to New York. But Avedon, it might have come from Dick, to tell you the truth, but Jan would have jumped in it. So basically the deal was he was going to travel all over the country, photograph the movers and shakers of America. And it could be A. Philip Randolph, who was the head of the Pullman porters who helped integrate everything. It was Kay Graham. It was Kissinger. It was the president. It was everybody, 8-10. And he began to do this, and then he was coming to San Francisco. And I was excited and very nervous. And I was sure that he'd be, you know, I'm Richard Avedon and you're not. And that he would, you know, whatever. And I would be, I'd feel inadequate and I hadn't had enough training. And all those panicky things where you doubt your existence, right? Which I think creative people go through all the time, which is any moment they're going to discover I'm a fraud. I don't think I own that all by myself. So Dick comes and he's, and I've got this 55 VW, right? And it has no springs. It has no nothing. And he comes and we're going to, I'm going to take him over to Sausalito for a drink so we could chat. And I put him in this my car. And, we're driving over the Golden Gate Bridge, and I always had to be in the middle lane because the desire to jump was always something about height with me. So I'm driving over, and we get to Sausalito, and the sun is setting. And it's lit up the Transamerica building, right? It was gorgeous. And he goes, and we're at this bar that goes out into the water, and he sees it, and he's like, oh, my God, that's gorgeous. And I say, oh, yeah, well, it does that every day. And then I say, those words come out of my mouth. I think, you are doing just what you were afraid he was going to do. So as they came out of my mouth, I looked at him, I said, I can't believe I did that. I'm so sorry. That was so rude. I said, you know what? Why I did that is I was sure you were going to look at us and go, I'm Dick Avedon and you're not. He cracked up. I said, will you forgive me? I said, I'll never do that again. And he was like, great. So he was wonderful, and he was so accessible. And then I had a luncheon for him. I went out, and Christo had built this fence, one of his great fences, and he built it from the ocean directly across North Berlin all the way over to 101. It was exquisite. We got there. I'd have a little luncheon at my house that I shared with a photographer. It was lovely. And we go out to the fence, and Lauren says, because we had this great lunch, and we get there, and he sees the light on the fence, right, because we're there at the end of the day, and now he's going crazy because Vogue should have done a fashion shoot here. He could not believe they'd done it, and he was just ranting and raving. And these three women, sort of middle-aged ladies, were there, and they look at him, and they look at us and say, would someone take our picture? That's it. They had the point and shoot. Would someone take our picture of the fence? And Evan goes, I'll do it. I'll take the picture. Because, so he gets the point and shoot, right? And of course, he always had his glasses. His glasses were always like right here, right there, just like that. Not sunglasses, but real glasses. So he takes the point and shoot, and he goes and he starts looking at it, and he goes to Lawrence, how does this thing work? Because he's not under the hood, and it ain't upside down and backwards, right? So Lawrence goes over and shows him. Now he shoots a roll of film that these women had in the camera, moving them, posing them, as if he was shooting it for Vogue. No, turn this way, drop your head, that's great, fine. And he does their whole roll of film, and they're mesmerized. They have, of course, no idea who he is. He then gives them the point and shoot, says, oh, thank you. I just love the fence. I wanted to, so nice. Thank you very much. And they walk off, and they never know that roll of film of them was shot by Richard Avedon.
So there's some Richard Avedon treasures out there, and somebody
out there. Nobody knew, and that's so long ago. It's in somebody's grandmother's whatever. So then we take a helicopter ride, as the sun is going down. He's going crazy. I, of course, I'd had mushrooms, because why not? And so I'm being on mushrooms, and he's going, wow, look at that. And I said, really? Wow. So that's the kind of life it was in those days. It was crazy. And he never knew. I may have told him many years later why I found it so fascinating about the color. But that was, he was terrific. And he did say to us, when he first came out, he was really nervous. And he thought that we would think he was a fuddy-duddy, right? That he wasn't interesting because he had this whole idea of what we were going to be like. And we had a whole idea of what he was going to be like. And in fact, neither of us was correct. He found us far more professional than he thought. Roger, he loved. So, it's these remarkable events happen that put me with people who I might, if I hadn't done what I did, which was about every 5 years decide to try something new, I would never have met all these people.
So let me just.
I'm sorry, I'm rambling. I'm so sorry.
No, you can ramble all day. That's what this show is about, rambling. That's how we learn. I just want to go back on a little technical aspect of the issue of the family, which is probably, it's got to be in the top 3 most famous issues of Rolling Stone
I
ever.
think so too. I think so too. You know, the thing is, and I have tucked away the stats from many of the layouts and how they got moved around, as well as I have an autographed copy of it. And here it is printed on toilet paper, right? And so it had to be, the printing was tricky. But so I have so many of the big, you know, full page double trucks with a one kind of layout, then the same pictures maybe showing up on another. So I hold those and I still have them, which I just adore, knowing that I've got those.
I mean, it was the first 2, I think that was the 3rd layout that you guys decided on, the 3rd major redesign.
Well, we were beginning to do a redesign. I'm not sure of the dates of that because Roger could tell you, but he began to redesign the logo was the first thing, okay? And there's a brilliant typographer named Parkinson, Jim Parkinson. And Jim Parkinson drew the new logo. And he came up with a typeface which you can access on Word, which I use all the time when I'm doing a design of anything. And it's called Parkinson. And you should look at it. And you can get it you can get it on Adobe, and you can get it on Word, and you can, you know, Google Jim Parkinson, and the typeface is spectacular. Spectacular.
So that's the redesign for the magazine, but the layout for the family, I think the original couple of layouts.
No, weren't as good. That's why I kept the stats, because you could see the evolution of them. And it's so the whole point is, you know, they became full page with very little information other than the name of the person underneath in this beautiful Parkinson type. And then the question was which ones would be ganged as a foursome. But nothing was cropped. No image was ever cropped. And it ran with the, you know, the black border. And so the question was the order in which to present these people. And who was not maybe a full, part of the decision on full page was, there were 2 decisions. One was their importance in the 200-year history, right? And what they had done to move and shake things along. That would be one. And 2 was the composition of the picture. What did the person look like? How strong an image was it? Because some of them were not Dick's fault. It was just who they were and what they projected, right? But certain people like A. Philip Randolph, because of the incredible change he made, you know, in civil rights, really, and in getting the Pullman porters to just be organized was a huge thing. And he was the first all-black union that was acknowledged and that they had to do business with, the owners of the railroads. So he is definitely a full page. And the other thing to look at when you look at this is the ties. The ties are fantastic. Nowadays, if you look, because you know what they wore and the ties, the picture of Kay is fantastic. Kay Graham is stunning. And I'm sure Rosemary Woods is in it. I'm pretty sure. She's small. So it was either a quarter-page picture in which they were ganged, right? Or it was full page. There might have been a full page with one that was a single to next to it, but I don't think so. I think it's either a full-page portrait facing a full-page portrait or a full-page portrait with 4 gang to fill the next page on the other side. And of course, the question is, which way do you look? Because I think most people, your eye goes to the right side first. When you're laying out a magazine, your eye automatically goes to the right. And then the left becomes, you know.
So there were 2 kind of, besides the monumental images that Avedon made, there were 2 kind of things that were, it was completely photo driven. It
Yes,
wasn't about,
totally.
and that evolved as the magazine took on different layouts.
Right.
It
And
became
it
more and
was,
more
it
photo
was no
heavy.
need. I don't believe, and I have the issue buried away. I should have gotten it out so you could see the, one of these, what I can do is at some point, I'll show you. I have to dig them out from under the bed, which will take a while, but I'd be happy to show you the layouts that you can see the different layouts that I've got on stats.
And then, well, the other thing is, I don't think that having the black film border was a thing until that issue in magazine publishing.
That's how, but that was the deal for Dick. I mean, that's how he shot, and all of his stuff. And I imagine when he shot for Vogue and other places, they might have cropped it because it was a fashion shoot. But these were serious, straight portraits, and they were straight on at the camera.
But having that black border in actual reproduction of the magazine, I don't think was done until then. And now it's kind of a shorthand for, I mean, there's even apps that will put a fake border on.
Well, I hate that.
On your images.
I hate all that stuff now. I'm a child of film. And so I have my own reservations about digital in terms of, well, we'll get into that. It's just,
what do you think it says as to the viewer? What's the shorthand that it says to a viewer when you have this document printed on the pages of a magazine that looks like something that you'd see on a contact sheet? What does that say? What's the bigger meaning?
In terms of the family issue, I think it gave a sense of formality. It was very formal. And these were very important people who were the movers and shakers of that time, 1976, right? And by having them in those black borders, the two things that happen. One, they're a bit like a butterfly that's been pinned on the wall, right? There's no movement. They're in that frame, and that's the frame. So it's not like they were cropped to look like that. It's not like anything was taken out. And they're in a box. It's very formal, and I think very appropriate for the subjects of those pictures. And then sometimes, so I just think it made you realize that these were all adults. This was a very adult shoot about people who influenced your life and in fact could make your life great or not. I mean, whether, there was Melvin Laird, there was,
that butterfly thing is very important because you as a viewer, and you're reading this in Rolling Stone, like you said, it's not great paper. It's the hippie magazine. It's the counterculture magazine.
It's not the New Yorker. It's not the Times. It's in this rock and roll magazine that's geared to the new culture.
And now the way they're presented, it does two things. It says, one, this is important for you to look at. These are important people. But two, you can stare at them. When if you stared at Henry Kissinger, you'd get kicked out of the restaurant. Especially, you wouldn't get into the restaurant if you were the normal Rolling Stone reader. Right. But now you could inspect and look at these people through Avedon's, unflinching gaze.
Yeah, not only that, that's why I think they're a bit like butterflies that have been pinned to the wall, because there's no escaping that frame. And therefore you get to look at them over and over. I love that part. I mean, first I laugh about the ties, but their eyes are like right there.
And so compare that to, say, Bill Epridge photographing JFK, or Bobby, sorry, not JFK, Bobby.
Well, it's,
The thing with Bill is saying, this guy, he's like us. He goes to the beach. He eats a sandwich. He takes a nap when he can on the airplane. And Avedon is saying something completely different. These guys are not the same. They're here now. You get to inspect them. You look at them.
Well, it's also a totally different premise. I mean, when Bill was photographing Bobby, It was a photojournalism assignment to capture what was going on every day. So he was there to chronicle daily events in Bob's life and what it was like to be on the road and what all of that was like traveling in a campaign, okay? That was a different, he was sent for a different reason. Richard wanted to do these portraits because he wanted to do straight on revealing portraiture. Portraiture is different than photojournalism out covering a story. You have a different, you're carrying a different brief for what you're supposed to bring back. Dick was there to take the strongest image he could of each of these men and women and put them in a box so that you could look at them and look at them and look at them and go back, and every time you looked at them you might see something a little more revealing. Okay, when you're out shooting a story like Bill was, you want it's a flow, right? There's the beginning, the middle, and the end. There's rhythm to it, like the way water breaks, like the way waves break. You get up there and then come down. So you have a whole different mindset of what you're looking to do because you have a tale to tell, right? That's how I look at it. Of course, everything to me is a movie, but it's, you have the thing moves in a horizontal fashion, okay? And that's where you're the beginning, the middle, and the end, okay? For Dick, for portraiture, it's a different game. You're looking for a single moment that will capture the essence of the person. And with Dick, he don't talk much, trust me, when he's shooting things like this. He isn't interested in making you comfortable. he was not interested. There's not a lot of laughter in these pictures. If you go through them, not a lot of people laughing. He wanted them to be powerful, to show their power. So he didn't talk to them much, I promise you. But that, in a sense, that's either makes them comfortable or uncomfortable. He didn't care. He was putting them in his box and putting the black border. There was no escape. In other words, there was no side door. It's not like if you're doing a beauty shot or a beauty portrait, or you're photographing a movie star and then you're chatting it up and da-da-da-da-da to get them relaxed. He didn't want them relaxed. If you look at those pictures, these are not people who are relaxed. They've agreed to do this because it's Richard Avedon, but he is putting the butterfly and putting it on the wall in the box. And that's a totally different approach than going out to shoot a photo story. If you look at all of the pictures that Bridget did on Bobby, ending with the one where he's been shot on the floor of the kitchen, there is a rhythm to everything. And when you see all the crowds and the frenzy and all of that, the end is almost right of that story. And that's a different mindset, totally. And then when you're making those assignments, you're looking for someone who understands the rhythm of a story. I mean, we'll get into Arthur when we get to Newsweek, but the thing that Arthur did was take that concept of in a box into his idea, but he shot it like photojournalism because he was shooting all the time. And then we come up with the image that we both agreed was the best of that. And they were candids because in shooting the 2 1/4, they never, you've been on the politics thing. When the minute the red light goes on the camera, you get the camera face. The minute the 35 goes up to your eye, they're ready for you. They got, how you doing? You're shooting the Hasselblad, they knew when he was going to push the button because they weren't used to that. So he was In his own way, Avedon was like an assassin, and I don't mean that nasty. I'm just saying he had the power of freezing people, and he knew, and they never knew when he was doing this. It wasn't like a light went off, right? He's got the release thing in his finger. You can't even see him do it. The next thing you know, he's moved the glass plate around, right? But they didn't, it's not like there's a big da-bam, I did it, because the light was all set up. They were all shot on white, seamless.
You were in the office the day Bobby Kennedy was shot, weren't you?
Oh, I'll tell you where I was. I was home because that was the worst year. I was at Live. That was the absolute 1968. The only good thing that happened in 1968 was at the end when Frank Borman and the guys went around the moon. That was the only good thing in 1968. It was a catastrophe because Dr. King killed everybody. It was awful. And I was home and watching TV and saw that Bobby was shot. And this was after the Dr. King story, which is also involves Epridge. And I just put my clothes back on and just went to the office and waited, to be told what to do. And basically I knew Epridge really well. We were great friends. And so Pollard kind of had me babysit him a bit. And after that, the burial and everything else, Pollard put him in a Winnipeg, sent him trout fishing for 3 months. And I tell you that story as it goes back to Dr. King's assassination. It's an interesting story, and it tells about Epridge and that one roll of film he shot. So do you want me to tell you that story?
I'd like you to share that. You don't have to.
No, I'll tell you because it's an amazing story. So Dr. King is murdered, and once again, I'm home, and I see it on the news, and I just know that you get dressed and go to work. So I get there, and apparently there was a young man named Joseph Lowe, L-O-W-E, and he was actually from, if I'm not mistaken, South Africa. And he was on an internship here because there was still the apartheid thing going on in South Africa in those days. And he had gotten this sort of internship, and he was with PBS. And he was in the room when Dr. King was shot. And he goes out and makes the picture of everybody on the terrace pointing towards where the gunshot came from. And he takes these pictures. And Dr. King, at the time he takes it, someone had put a towel over Dr. King's head where the wound was the worst. And he then, this poor kid, I mean, this was just like his hero and everything else. So anyway, he calls PBS and his boss there and tells him where he is, what's happened, what he's got in the way of film. And the guy from PBS was great friends with Phil Kuhnhart, who was the assistant managing editor. He called Phil, and Phil bought the film sight unseen. So the kid now is told to get out of Memphis and get to New York, and that he'll be met by someone from Life magazine. So, and that someone now is me, because I'm the, why not send the kid? She seems to be able to do a lot of stuff. So I do that, and I go out, and it's like almost 2 o'clock in the morning when this plane is coming in. I've got a rolled up Life magazine. And in those days, you could take a cab to Newark, but you'd have to take a Jersey cab back. And I did not want to do that. I wanted this way that I took to wait for me. And I and I said to him, you just go over there, run the meter. I'm with Life magazine. I showed him and I said, not only will I pay what's on the meter, but I have a $50 bill here, and it has your name on it. And so that's just for your pocket when we get there, but you have to stay here. So I go into the airport, I'm walking around with the Life magazine, and there's this young kid coming towards me, young African-American kid, and he's just, you could tell it's him because he's just like blown away, right? Just ridiculous. So I get him in the cab, and we head back to New York to the Life magazine, Time Life building. And I say to him, "Oh, you poor thing. You'll understand this very well." And I'm like, you poor guy. This is so awful. And it was. I feel so bad for you. This is terrible. I'm kind of rubbing his back. And I say, "Where's the film? Have you got the film?" "Oh, this is the worst thing. I can't believe you had to witness this. I understand. You're from South Africa." I said, "Where's the film?" And he goes, I have the film. I said, "Oh, great. Why don't you give that to me? And then that'll all be taken care of." And he goes, "I processed it." I said, "Excuse me?" He goes, it was black and white. He goes, "I processed it." "Really?" "Yeah, I was afraid if they might take it from me." I said, "Well, you processed it. Well, where are the negatives?" He goes, I took care of that." I said, "Well, show me." So he goes, he had taken a manila envelope, cut 6 strips, put each negative in that strip of a manila envelope, right, and taped it to his chest. And so he starts to tell me, "No, they're taped to my chest because I knew they." I'm thinking, this is clever. This was actually smart because he was afraid because Memphis was starting to burn down, right? So I now have him in the car, and I'm starting to unbutton his shirt, right? And I get his shirt open, and fortunately, the kid had no chest hair. And I'm talking to him, and I'm unbuttoning her. And I keep saying, "I'm so sorry what you've had to go through. Terrible, terrible." And the cab driver sees me unbuttoning his shirt. He starts yelling, not in my cab, like I'm about to do give the guy something. And I said to him, "Just drive. I'm not doing." And I get the shirt open, and as I'm telling him how horrible, and I meant it, that it was a horrible experience for him, I'm ripping the stuff that's gaffer taped to his body because I know I cannot go in that building without the film. I know what I've been told, and I'm going to do exactly. So by the time we get there, and the cab drivers calm down, I said, "Don't forget, I got $50 for you, so just relax." And I've got the film, and I've now rebuttoned his shirt. And I am talking to him softly the whole time, and I really mean what I'm saying to him, but I also know I have a task. So which I think it was one of the reasons I got to go do the astronauts afterwards. So we get in the building, I bring him up to Phil Kuhnhart, and I introduce him to Phil, and I stand behind him, and I just put my thumb up like this. So Phil knows I've got the film, and I take it down to the lab. So we run the pictures, and Epridge comes and we're looking at the contact sheets, and he sees that the young man did not photograph Martin Luther King until they'd covered up the wound on his head, which was massive. And he says to me, "You could tell this kid was an amateur." I said, "What are you talking about?" Because he covered up his head. He waited till that was done before he took the picture. And I say to him, this is April of '68. I say to him, "Are you telling me that if Bobby Kennedy was shot in front of you, you wouldn't go down to try to help him? You wouldn't want to, you love Bobby. I mean, you've been there. I mean, that's how I met him. It was because of you, blah, blah, blah. I can't believe." And he goes, "No, my job is to record what happens in front of me. My job is to do that. Everybody else's job here is to go through the film and decide what's best. That's not my job." So jump forward to June, and he takes those pictures. And there's only a few that are out of focus. But I'll tell you this, it had a huge impact on him. I mean, Billy drank a lot, but after this, forget about it. And he never, in my opinion, it was a wound at all times for him, that he did what he was supposed to do, but he paid a high price for it. And I've often thought later on, as I was sending photographers to war and editing war pictures and other things, you pay a price for that. And those images, you know, they come out to play at the worst times in your brain. So I even know that for me sometimes from all the stuff I've looked at, because don't forget, we look at everything and then decide what civilians can see. So I just am telling you that story because those pictures from Epridge are extraordinary. And the fact that there's maybe 5 frames that are out of focus by the time it registered in his brain what had happened. And then they go right back, sharp as a tack. So, you know, you bring that up, and every time everybody brings that up, the one thing I think about is those 2 situations together. And I think Joe Lowe was completely devastated, but because he waited for the towel, I think it may have, though I can't be sure, but I think it had less of a burning impact because he was an amateur and he was not a pro. So I always think of that whenever that situation is brought up. And as a matter of fact, when Bill died, I told that story to understand. And, you know, later on, I go to run Sports Illustrated and Epridge is working for me. But, you know, it was a real lesson. I don't know, I digress, but it's a hell of a story. And it's a true story. And photographers do pay a price. And so do picture editors, because they see so much horridness. And I do believe there's PTSD involved. Because I'm telling you, when this event happens, man, it's like the Dalmatians come out of the firehouse. And I, you know, first of all, I'm making assignments all the time in my head. This was true in 9/11. And I'm not here. I'm in California when it happens. But I'm telling you, whatever it is, you know, I'll never forget Pan Am 103. It was after that I decided it was time for me to leave news. And that's when I went to sports.
Tell me about Lockerbie. I mean, you made some very quick moves after that, and that was people don't realize at that time how competitive the news magazines were.
Oh my God, yes. And you know, and it happened, and you're calling all the agencies and you're buying everything up. And Peter Turnley's in Paris for me, you know, looking at, and I'm buying shit sight unseen for a while. And one of the things I bought sight unseen, after I'd agreed to the money, which was a lot, I had Turnley go into the Paris office to just make sure everything got packed up. And he called me and he said, I think you got taken, because this stuff, what this guy said he hasn't got it. So I said, tell Jacqueline not to write the check. Wait. And the film came in, and I opened it up, and it was, you know, it was not what he promised. So I called and I told him I was not going to pay him. And then he used my best Irish swear words, and that he had screwed around with the wrong person. And then I was putting his pictures right back on the next Concorde going over, and that I would not pay him. And if I had a sound out of him, I would make sure that the next job would be working for a dry cleaner. And I had to translate because he was French. And people told me later that he almost fainted, but I didn't give a shit. And when I had heard from Turnley, I went down and told my editor-in-chief, Rick Smith, I said, I think I got taken. And I agreed to pay, $10,000 or something. And I'm not going to pay it if, in fact, what I'm told is true when I look at the pictures. And don't you worry about it. We'll never get a bill. He was like, you got it. But you have to always confess these things. But I was buying pictures, and then the pictures I did get were it was so grim. People hit the ground so hard that they bounced, so their impression was next to the body. And, hanging out of trees and all sorts of stuff. And, the seats hanging out of trees, but people hanging out of the trees. But the thing I will never forget is they hit the ground with such an impact that it literally was an impression of the body, which then bounced out and landed next to it. It's like a preliminary grave. And years later, I was asked to judge the Alexia Foundation up at the contest up in Syracuse. And what I found out later, when they asked me, and I said, I was thrilled. I said, yeah, and I went up there. Well, it's named after a young girl who died in that plane crash in Lockerbie. And she was a J student in Syracuse. And her parents had some considerable money, and they're Greek and lovely people. And that was named after their daughter. That's who Alexia was. And she died in Pan Am 103. And I told Mike Davis to tell them anything they wanted about me, but never tell them, ever, that I did that story, that I worked on that I got those pictures, because I did not even want them to look at me and think I had seen what they never saw, and that I knew just how awful it was. Because some of those we did not run, you couldn't run them. But those live with you. I'm going to bet that the picture you shot in the Iraq, that one in the Iraq War with the guy burned alive coming right through the windshield, which no one would publish in America, but did in Europe, I have to believe that picture lives with you, Ken. It does. You can't get something like that. You can't really bury it. You can put it in a box and try to lock that box. But there are times when that box gets opened. Am I wrong?
Well, that would be my next question. I mean, how you've dealt with every photographer of note, either, whether they work for you or not, you know them quite well. You know them all.
I know them all.
Yeah. So how much damage do these people carry from your perspective?
Conflict photographers, they carry a lot. They may deny it, but I knew them from Vietnam. When I worked at Life, I knew all the Vietnam Life photographers. I knew Larry Burroughs. I knew all of them. They would come in, and I know that what they saw, I wound up dating some guys who had shot there, and I know the nightmares they had. We're in bed and I'm asleep, and I'm awakened by, whatever. They saw things, and it always affected them. Mostly that's why they never had first marriages that lasted. That was so rare. But you get the gold star. But, it's just, from that point on, one of the first things I worked on when Father was the Me Lie stuff. I remember that coming in the house. I remember it so clearly.
So what's the flip side? I didn't know. I knew Bill was a hero of mine. He was a good friend of mine, but I didn't know him near as well as you. But he was always the sweetest, most gracious man in the room.
Wonderful. And he loved to help photographers, and he was all of those things, but he was also haunted, and you wouldn't know that. For a person like you, I was there, so I knew it from the very beginning. Okay. But he would have a different face for young photographers, and if he was doing work in Missouri, which is where he graduated from, he just had a gentleness about him, and he wanted to help everybody. He was great for mentoring. He never felt that competitive thing. But underneath that, if you were to get him alone or you'd go out, he would drink too much. All the time. All the time. It was an issue. And I'm just telling you, because I know after the Bobby thing, he went to LA, and I was out there then and doing my stuff, and I know, Jesus, I know all of, the drugs, the alcohol. Fell asleep, he's burning, his house almost burned down. So these these are demons that live with you. And if you're a conflict photographer, you're seeing the worst that can happen in life, right? You see people shot in front of you. You see, like in South Africa, people being necklaced. And one of the shooters I had, Mark Peters, he would run in the middle. He spoke every township language, and he'd run in and rescue those people. A great, great risk. So,
okay, I just want to stop you there real quick because, you can talk more about Mark Peters. He's an extraordinary person besides being a photographer, and he wasn't always carrying a camera. And there is that transition, and I think it speaks to his humanity that, he was he'd seen a lot of combat.
Oh, a lot of combat. And not only that, this is how he became a photographer. He was from Rhodesia before it became Zimbabwe. They wanted him in the military. He ran away to South Africa. They returned him. He was hanging up there. And he wound up being a tracker. Why? Because he grew up outside of Harare, and he could track anything. And so he became and then he got into a fist fight with some guy above him in rank over a woman, of course. And he wound up in their version of the brig, in which you have to put your feet go up and down. You have to keep time wherever you are, on a can, eating, whatever. And they, and they waited, they knew what he could do. So they basically waited, let him have that for about a month. And then they said to him, well, you have an option. You can stay here for a full year, or you can come and be a tracker for us. And that's how it started for him. He'd go in 50 clicks in as a tracker with a camera, climb a tree and photograph where the rebel forces were. But he learned how to shoot. And then eventually he got it. And then the stories from that are just mind-boggling. But then he got out of there, and he never really went. And it was never easy to get him a passport. But then he stayed in South Africa, covered all the troubles there. And he was on that story. And the day I arrived at Newsweek, I had already gotten permission and approval to take the job, that I could hire X number of contractors the world into pieces, because I knew Time had 55 contractors. And I wanted to have 5 or 6. And I said, I'm looking for guys who are a combination of guerrillas who I could put in a tuxedo and they could have dinner with Mrs. Graham. So I need both of those qualities, because I knew they could be as tough as nails, but they would also know how to be charming when they needed to be. Jimmy Colton told me about Mark. I call him, and they were just offered him a Time contract. And he'll tell you the story, which he tells me all the time. And so he calls, and he answers the phone. I say, is this Mark Peters? And he goes, yeah. And he had the Time contract in front of him. And Noctoy standing next to him, thank you, trying to get him to sign it. And he goes, I said, I understand you're going to sign a Time contract. I said, honey, don't do that. That's crazy. I said, I'm so much more fun than Arnold. And you're not going to have people hanging over your shoulder. You're going to be totally in charge. So, honey, don't do that. And he goes, hey. And that's it. He pushed the Time contract away. And to this day, he says to me, that was the best phone call. And the way you said that, like, honey, don't do that. I'm so much more fun than Arnold. And he said, you were. And that was it, because each of them got a piece of the world. And my answer was, don't call me to ask me if you show. Call me from there, because you've got Time on your side and I don't. And if you're wrong, don't worry about it. I'll cover. And nobody will get to you, because they'll have to go through me, and that ain't going to happen. So that's how come internally I gave Peter a contract. That's how come, all these guys, and it was the smartest thing, but I worried about them. But I never lost anybody, which was quite remarkable, because that had not been the case before, and it could once again not be the case, certainly, because it's even more dangerous in a way. I mean, you want to go, here's what you don't want to deal with. You don't want to deal with malice, that they have no sense of humor. So the Shining Path is a place you don't want to be. You didn't want to be, with the Pol Pot people. Communists you can kind of deal with, but even the Chinese and those things. So that was my theory. If they look like Maoists, don't go. Don't go. I did have somebody taken by the Shining Path, but fortunately his wife worked for Danny Ortega, which was a huge help, and he got released. Bill Gentile.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
It seems to me that the qualities you looked for in photographers, that they're as tough as nails, but they could put a tuxedo on and go to a formal dinner.
Absolutely.
It's kind of the same qualities that you have.
Yes. But you know what? Mrs. Graham loved these guys. She adored them. When she went to South Africa, the only person she wanted to hang with was Mark. And he said, do you want to ride on my motorbike? We're going to go, oh, yes. And they were just, and she would say, they'd have some big event, and she'd say, is Mark Peters coming? And of course the writers were like, I want Mark there. So this was her, she thought, she would come to me all the time and say, this is amazing. And they're wonderful. I said, yes, and I think they even know what fork to use. She said, yes, it's fantastic. But that was really important, because there were times when you have to be very elegant, and there's times when you have to be willing to smack somebody around.
Isn't that always the case with photographers? I mean, I don't know if you were in journalism why you would hang out with anybody that wasn't a photographer or a photo editor.
No.
I mean, let's face it.
Here's what I loved about photographers. If they tell you you can't go in the front door, the first thing photographers look for, where's the back door? Where's the side window? I bet I can get into the basement. My theory was always, when I was trying to get people to do, portraiture and famous people, I needed to get a no to a maybe. Once I had maybe, I owned them. It was mine. It was just a question of attrition. But if you can get a no to a maybe is just as good as a yes. It's just another smaller step. Big step is no to maybe. And I tell that to my students all the time. Where's the side door? You can't go in front? Oh, really? There's got to be a side door. You just slide right in there. And find a way to to be invisible, which of course is essential for photographers. The ones who are so successful become the wallpaper. So even when they know, if you're on an assignment and they know you're there and they've agreed, that when the pictures get really good is when photographers become invisible. And then they move and they forget they're there. And that's when it all clicks in. And when I'm teaching now, that's what I say to them. You have to figure out how to be invisible. And part of that is not having fear. You can be afraid, but it's like a dog. If they smell somebody's afraid, or a horse. You know I'm right about horses. If a horse senses that you're afraid, you're on the ground in a nanosecond. But if a horse senses that, get it? But guess what? I'm as tough as you are. They'll try. And if you don't go off, that's the ballgame. Never going to happen. I mean, that was my experience with horses. And I think that's my experience with people. Do not let them smell your fear. Fear is a great motivator, by the way, as a shooter, because I used to put fear into photographers. But I did it only for certain ones, and it was a motivator.
But every photographer had a different recipe, and you kind of managed your photographers like a remuda of horses, a cabbie.
Yes. Yeah, because each one is different, and each one has their own little. Each photographer has the ones I liked, and the ones I liked working with, and the ones I would hire, is because I knew they had a special way of seeing. That was number one. And in order to have that, they had certain areas where they were had a little bit of. All creative people have that streak of insecurity, and they work against that to keep themselves They use that to almost bounce off of because they don't want to give in to it, but it's a motivator to make that voice be quiet. I mean, everybody's got that inner critic, right? Unless you're, I don't know what. So, I mean, each person, you have to find what makes them tick, what makes them laugh. It's very important to find out what makes each separate photographer laugh, because that's a great way to make people comfortable with you, that you get their jokes and you realize what joke you can tell them that they'll get. That diffuses any kind of initial anxiety of being around you. But also with me, it was well known that, and it's what I told the contract guys. I said, no one will ever get to you without having to go through me. And trust me, that ain't going to happen. But if you lie to me, if you don't tell me the absolute straight on truth about what's happened, if you ever lie to me, it's over. Don't let the door hit your ass on the way out. So I can't abide that. But other than that, everything is open. Plus, I said when they hired me, and Arnold Drapkin gave a big dinner and whatever, and they were saying, well, we'll see if she can bid blind and all that. She hasn't done news since life, which was true. And even then, I wasn't assigning it. I was just exposed to it. So I said, well, here's what I think is going to happen. I think when guys in war situations and someone's been trying to kill them, and they call in my question before everybody here, and it was a very crowded space for a lot of photographers at this dinner. I said, "Here's
This was at a dinner that Arnold, who was the director of photography at Time Magazine, your
right.
competitor,
and it was a lovely dinner, and he really put it together. It was in Washington, is my memory, and it was at Germain's, the famous.
Germain's was the restaurant, the Chinese restaurant where all the photographers
went because
Vietnamese.
Vietnamese, and she was married to Dick Swanson, who I knew from the Life magazine days. He was one of Life's photographers in Vietnam, and Germaine was a tough gal, and the one person Larry Burroughs loved working with. Oh, she would parachute into anything. Germaine was amazing. So anyway, they had this restaurant, and it was there, as my memory goes. And basically, the sort of line was, well, she hasn't done hard news for a long time, which was true. I've been doing rock and roll. Then at Newsweek, New York Magazine, I was doing fashion with Anna Wintour, for God's sakes, before she went to Vogue. I was doing all sorts of portraiture. I would do some news with Nick Pileggi on stories, but nothing, And now suddenly they've reached out to get me to be the first woman to ever run the photo department in any of the news magazines. And I'm thinking when they first called, they must have got the wrong number. But I managed to lay down how I would do it, and they didn't have to hire me, but those were my rules, and it would be fine if they didn't, because I had a job. I was late for a deadline. So basically, the deal was this dinner. I've accepted it, and I was terrified to take the job. I'll tell you that, and I'll tell you who talked me into taking the job. Two people, Steve McCurry and Jim Nockway. They sat in this house, my apartment, and they both said the same thing. You can do this. And I kept saying, oh my God, it's been so long. Nockway said, you can do this. You can do it. Because, we'd given him work at New York Magazine when he first came from Albuquerque. And McCurry too. So I'm like, okay, they're right. I have to jump and do it. So anyway, now I'm having this dinner. It's just prior to starting here, and the room is filled with Stone and Newsweek, U.S. News, freelancers. And the gist of the argument was, we'll see if she can bid blind, and if she can, first woman, we'll see how she does. And my theory was that they had a whole bunch of chairs pulled up this center ring, watching me up on the high wire, because I do everything visually, just waiting for me to fall. And hoping I would, because then this woman thing would be over. And they tell you what, we always were there. We could get just this high, and then there was the glass ceiling. You could be the assistant director, but you could never make the jump. And I'd never been at the wires. That was the whole deal, all that stuff. So anyway, after this kind of compliment, sort of, is delivered something of a left-handed compliment, but it was an interesting challenge, and I rose to it, and I got up and I thanked him for the dinner, and which I meant very much, and it was very nice, and I really, really appreciated it, and it was very kind of him. I said, but I think what's going to be really interesting is when any of these photographers are in an environment where someone just shot at them and tried to kill them, and they call in, my question for all of you is, are they going to want to talk to their dad and have to be so brave with their dad to show that they're just as virile as dad? Or are they going to want to call in and talk to their mom, who they can tell everything to, and they can let their hair down, and they can be emotional, and mom, of course, will say nothing to anybody about the call. So that's my question. And you know what? I looked over and I said, my money's on the mother.
So how long after that did you go out and steal Arthur Grace from
Right away.
the magazine?
Right away. That was my first, when I talked to Mr. Smith, Rick Smith, about taking the job, I had a couple of criteria. And one was I wanted to have some contract photographers. And the other one was I want to steal one photographer from Time magazine to be a staff photographer. One. That's all I want. And he said, okay. And that one was, I knew that it was open sports season on the photo editors, because when they would go in the old days, you have to show your slides, and you go into this conference room, and the senior editor, let's say Nation, was there, and then the person who had to show it, and da-da-da. And then the senior editor would get all pissy and nasty, and the game was to humiliate the picture editor. I'd done my homework. So I said to Pollard, I said to Mr. Smith, I said that I understand this is the culture, but that can't exist if I go there. And what I'll do is go and meet with every single senior, and I will tell them how thrilled I am, and I would be thrilled if I wind up giving me the job, and to tell them that if they ever have any problem with anybody who works for me, they only have to call me, and I'll come down to their office, or they can come up to mine and we'll close the door, and they'll tell me what the problem is, and I will fix it. And he looked at me and goes, yeah, and I said, but if any of them continue this nonsense of attacking and humiliating the picture editors, I will assume they have done it to me, and that's what I will tell them. And I will tell them that would be something very stupid, because like a snake in the grass, I will wait for them. And at some point, I will humiliate them, pull their pants down, literally, figuratively, in front of you, and humiliate them. And you, I looked at Smith, I said, and you will let me. I will only ever need to do it once. After that, it'll all get worked out. And I said, and probably the person, if I have to do it, that I'm going to do it, would wind up doing it to, is somebody you've been thinking about getting rid of. And he looked at me, and I said, you know, so that's one thing. And then I want to have these contract photographers. And the other last thing is I want a public coronation. And he said, what? I said, I have the picture. I can show it to you. I said, I want a public coronation. You have this place called Top of the Week. And I'm going to invite everybody, including my mother. And I want them to see you put the crown on my head. And you know what that'll mean? That'll mean to everybody in that room, including the assistant managing editors, that I only answer to you. And I will, of course, fight with you continually to get the picture I want in the magazine. And you want me to do that. That's why you would hire me. But nobody else. So he looked at me and I said, but this is a lot to ask for. So it's okay if you don't want to do it. And I have to get back to New York Magazine because Ed Kozner, who had been on the high wire there, who had been a Walenda, okay, off. I said, I have to get back, and he doesn't know about this. And so, you know, it's okay. So why don't you think about it and then let me know what you want to do. And if you don't want to do it, I totally get it because I'm asking a lot. And it's okay. I have a good job. And I get up to go, and he says to me, where are you going? I said, well, you have to think about it. He said, I don't think so. I think you just sit down. And that was the deal. We shook hands. I said, I don't need anything in writing because I'm going to trust your word. And he said, you got it. And everything I asked for, I got, including the public coronation. And then right after that, I called Arthur. And you want to know why I picked Arthur?
Yeah, why'd you pick Arthur? How many times did you actually work with a contract with anybody, or was it just everybody was good for their word? There weren't any contracts, basically.
Oh no, I had a contract. The photographers who were on contract had to sign a contract, but that's just a formality so that the number of days, because I knew how to write them because of Pollard. I was there when he did every single contract, so I knew what they had to have in them and what they didn't need. Right? I was not going to own their pictures in perpetuity. I wasn't going to permit that. So Artie was a different case. I always loved Arthur's work. I knew him. He had a brilliant sense of humor, which I found captivating and important. And he hated standing where everybody else was, which was just like Annie. And he saw differently. All you need to do is look at the picture right over your head. Arthur saw things differently. And to have him have to White House shift over there made him crazy. And he just didn't want any part of it. And it was another thing I loved. And I loved the fact that he was an original. He wasn't like anybody else. Annie's an original. Right? Avedon's an original. There are a number of Donna Ferrato, that's an original. Right? And they have a very clear vision of how they're going to work and the stories they want to do and how they're going to present it. And there are a number of them. You're an original. You know what you want to do. You try so hard not to get pigeonholed. That's what you're looking for in a photographer. That's what I'm trying to teach the kids I see now. So Arthur was perfect. And then on that whole thing we did on Choose Me, that was Arthur's idea. Arthur came to me on the campaign for '88 and said, I want to shoot it in 2 1/4 because those bastards never know when you're taking the picture. You're looking down. And I'm like, dang, yeah, go. And so he made these wonderful pictures. And the first time I showed one in the Nation section, they'd hired this assistant managing editor from Time. He shall go unnamed. And I turn in the pictures, and the person who's running the Nation section doesn't really, not yet got full fight in them. And the layout comes up, and my friend Patricia Bradbury, who worked with Roger and I, and she's now there as the art director. I got Roger to come there as the design director, blah, blah, blah. So we're a team. And she comes to me, she goes, I think you should see what so-and-so did downstairs, and he cropped this picture to a vertical. I said, give me the layout, I'll be right back. I go down, I go in his office, and all these people are in there, and I wait. And I said to him, if you got a minute, I need to talk to you, but I don't need all these people. I'll wait till everybody's gone. And then they were gone, and I closed the door, and I said, you don't get to crop this picture. You understand? You can't have it. This is full frame, 2 1/4. You cannot crop it. You cannot crop any of Arthur's pictures from this series. And he goes, well, I said, I'm going to try this one more time. You do not get to crop this picture. Do I come in here and edit your copy? Of course I don't, because I'm not trained to do that. You don't crop my pictures, not ones like that, because you're not trained to know how to do that. And if you want to crop this picture, I'm sorry, and I just ripped the stat off the sheet and said, you can't have it. And now if you want to take this to a higher authority, I suggest we go across the hall to Mr. Smith. Because they already knew at the public coronation. I said, because that's who will decide this argument. If you want to take it, I'm delighted. So it was quiet, and he said, well, okay, well, I see your point, of course. Well, we'll run that full frame. I said, damn, that's great. You're so smart. I knew you'd understand. And I walked out and never got a problem with him. And I called Artie and told him. He goes, "Oh, Hefe," because that was his name. Oh, Hefe, that's good. But then, you know, it became a book, and it became a special issue, and it became everything. But that was Artie. And then everybody started to copy it. P.F. Bentley copied it. It was all done in black and white. No one had done it. And it was its own version of the family. Right? It's just the same thing. Only he shot that way like it was a photojournalism story. So we had a number of options as opposed to Dick, which was, you know, the only option he had was the expression on their face. But Artie had the option of location, right? Because he'd be shooting it all along. So they might be getting their makeup put on, but he also did them in the campaign stop. And he also did. So it was a different flow. It was a photojournalism flow. And they were like butterflies stuck on the wall. And when we laid out the book, we laid it out as opposed to when they entered the campaign and when they left. So it was almost like tombstones. It was determined by when they dropped out. It'd be fun to do that now. My God, with 20 of them, it would be just fantastic. What a record of drops. But anyway, but Arthur was that person. That's why I sent Arthur to Robin Williams. When I had to make that assignment, well, of course it would be Robin and Arthur. Did you know Arthur did stand-up when he first got out of the Marines in Boston? Did you know he did stand-up?
Well, that syncs up with my theory that every photographer should have at least 5 minutes of material and be ready to go at any time.
And all the time, because you're going to need it. Well, Artie had that, and then of course, this big assignment on Robin Williams. It was right after they had done. Just before Good Morning Vietnam was being released, and David Anson, who ran had movie at Newsweek, knew this was the breakthrough movie. So they're going to do a cover story. And I have to think of who am I going to send on the road, because Robin he's doing one-night stands that are going to end at the Metropolitan Opera House. So of course it's Arthur. Arthur's the funniest person. I knew he'd done stand-up. And I thought, Robin's brain, you know, Arthur's brain is fast. Robin's is faster, but together they're going to have a great time. And that's exactly what happened. And he kept telling Robin, he always called me Hefe. When I took the job at Newsweek, he said, Hefe, there'll never be any gum on the bottom of your shoe. It's such a classic. I said, what do you mean? He goes, oh no. They're going to be lined up. They'll do whatever you say. And I just thought that was, you know, this classic Arthur, you know, humor. We're just, and we're still great friends. I mean, I'm great friends with all the guys I hired over the years. I never wasn't. I mean, you know, a couple didn't work, but that was their decision. Trust me, not mine. And that's okay. You know, I probably did do something that was offensive. There's no doubt. I'm sure I did. Didn't mean to, but it did. But, you know, so Arthur was perfect. And he goes off and he tells Robin all about Hefe did that. And, of course, on the tour, as they're going across, we get a phone call, and it's somebody pretending to be Danny Ortega. Guess who? Robin. And he's doing it to kind of be seductive so that I'll be so excited that I'll, you know, he'll control the edit part. And that's when I said, oh, Commandante, could you put Arthur on the phone for a minute? I need to talk to him about exposures. Arthur gets on. I said, don't let that happen ever again. Not till I'm finished. When I finish the edit, I'll be there for him. And that's how it went. And then it was like, well, he wants you to come to the show, you know, Opera House. I said, once I'm done with the edit, if he still wants me there, I'd be delighted. And that's how a 19-year friendship began between Arthur and I and Robin. That rarely happens.
So
rarely.
Were these photographers more like children?
Yes, that's exactly. Here's my thing. I never had, but when I went to my 50th high school reunion, which for a long time I wasn't going to do it, and then we had to write about what we'd done in the 50 years since graduation, and so I did. And then, but at the end, because most of them came in like, Bob and I got married and we had 3.2 children and now we're retired in Naples, Florida. It's just, and mine was like page stuff. And at the end I said, I never got married and I never had children, but instead of children, I raised photographers. And I did. And I did because I was very, you know, I think photographers, when they stay really good, there's a part of them that's still always a child. I mean, think about Burnett. How many times has Burnett gone and shot the Olympics? But every time he goes, he thinks about how to do it differently, and it's like a brand new experience, which is kind of like kids. If you take kids to the amusement park at a certain age, they don't care how many times they've ridden that one ride, right? That is the first time they've ever been on it. They scream like it's the first time. And that's the quality that I think is really good in wonderful photographers, is that part of them stays childlike, and they don't feel like they're repeating. They're trying to find a new way to look at something they think they know. That's why when I start young photographers out, I make them take a 5-block radius from their house. Arthur taught me this. And I tell them I'm an alien. And so I don't know what Astoria, Queens is, but you need to go out and give me a 5-block radius and show me what Astoria, Queens is, because I don't know. I just landed here. And that involves, to show me, the bar you go to, the people you know in the neighborhood. And some of them don't know anybody in the neighborhood. And I know right away that they have to learn how to do that, or they'll never be a successful photographer. They have to be able to get along with the dry cleaner and have a relationship. If you can't have a relationship with people, then you need to be photographing food, because you have to worry about the banana talking back to you. But if you're going to try to be a photojournalist, you better know how to relate to all kinds of people. And you have to figure out how to get out of yourself for that. And you have to confront that part of you. I mean, all beginning photographers are sure they always say the same thing to me in school now. Because, I said, I bet you think it's invasive. You're invading someone's space. And they go, yeah, I do. I said, well, guess what? It is. So either get over it or go photograph food, because you are going to invade people's space, but it's how you do that that determines whether or not you're offensive. And it's how you approach people. You don't just walk up to, I said, animals are the same way. Children, if you just walk in on children, then you're going to freak them out. They're going to run behind. But if you get down on the ground so that you're the same eye level, I mean, there's something about that. It makes you less threatening. So you have to figure out how to do that. And you can only do that if you get out of being afraid of what you're doing. And that you accept the fact that it is invasive, but it's going to be invasive in a way that is I'm not talking about conflict, confrontational. It has to be a way that relaxes people and makes them want to be part of your story that you're doing. And then you head out of the way and just record. And you're going to try in the beginning. I don't want you giving them a lot of verbal direction if you can avoid it. And that way you'll learn, they'll be more comfortable, and then you can very gently them, right? And it becomes an art form, right? It's a seduction. And it is. And it's the problem with conflict photographers that they go through is it's casual intimacy. They see horrible stuff. They're very intimate with it. They're very initially, empathetic with what's going on. And then they get on the plane and go home and have a drink, something to eat. And whether they're covering the famine. I mean, when they would come back from situations like that, I used to say, when you get on the plane, I'm wondering, is the first thing you do order a drink or have something to eat? From a famine situation where you've not, and they would be like, whoa, what was that? And I said, well, it's important. Or do you just sit and think about what you saw? Those are your three options. I was always more intrigued with the ones who thought they needed to think about it for a while before they did anything. And they climbed back into real life kind of slowly. Some just turn it off. But then I know that deep down, it's not turned off. So they aren't, I think creative people are all creative people in some way, have a great child side. And I think that should be encouraged and nurtured. And that's how, and each one nurtured differently. Different. When I'm doing this teaching gig now and graduate, each one, that's why I do it one-on-one behind a closed door. It's nobody's business what I say to each one. It's different what I say to each one because each one is different. And I can tell right away by their pictures what they have to work on, not just photographically, but what they have to work on inside themselves to release themselves, to be able to take risks and to be willing to be wrong and make mistakes, because you only learn from your mistakes. You never learn from your successes, for God's sakes. You're too busy being puffed up. I can speak. The things that taught me the most were the most extraordinary mistakes I made in my life, in which I kept, which your face burns for a while, for a long time sometimes. And you have to learn from that so you don't do it again. And that's what I tell these young students that I have. They're not so young. They're graduate students. And I say, every time, that's why I don't let them erase stuff on digital. It's the worst thing in the world. The beauty of film with you guys is when you screwed up, you had to look at it. And if you were freelance and you screwed up on color and you were paying for it, you had your undivided attention if it was Ektachrome. And if it was Kodachrome and it had to go to friggin' New Jersey and cost you a fortune and you screwed up, you looked at that and you said, I can't afford to do this again. Financially, I can't afford, and I can't afford, I'm going to have to come up with an excuse about the lab burned down because I can't turn this in. Or I'll say, if I'm going to turn it in, I screwed up, but let me tell you, I'm about to reshoot it, and that's at no charge. Because it is important to turn in great work. But that's the beauty of film. You have to look at it. The first semester I'm there, I have this wonderful young photographer who I'm still in touch with. That's the beauty of where I'm working. I'm allowed to continue to work with them even after graduation. And he had a lot of talent, but he needed some tough love. And I basically poo-pooed everything he turned in. It's trash. And then I made him tape over the back of the digital camera. No peeking. No peeking. I said, in the old days in film, you didn't get to see what you shot till it was over. So there'll be no peeking. I'm not interested in ducks. I'm not interested in people who are always doing this with their digital camera, because the minute they look down and look back up, they got to take another 45 seconds to lock in on what they should be shooting. It's like what Bresson says. You do this all the time. Guess what? Cartier-Bresson said, oftentimes the picture's in the middle. And overshooting is like overeating. It's not healthy. And, nor is it healthy when a student will come in and show me 12 pictures. Well, these are the 12 pictures I shot. I said, really? 12 whole pictures? That's all you shot? My Lord, damn. I'm just stunned. Let's look at those 12. Really? You're going to bring me 12 pictures? And I'm supposed to teach you how to edit? You give me 12 pictures. How's this for an edit? There's shit. How's that? Only I don't say shit. They're crap. I don't see anything in here. So there's 12 that are on the floor.
Oh.
So here's what you get to do. You get to send me everything. But don't be ridiculous. And we'll see how much you think you should send me. With Ivan, it was really great. He was working with a digital Leica, which I like because it is like shooting 36 frames. And I had covered up the back of the camera. And I said to him, this is your story assignment, right? 5 blocks. He said, well, the bar I go to is 6. I said, okay, how about this? I'll give you 7 blocks. And then you're going to give me first a shot list. You're going to go around your neighborhood and make up a shot list, something they're never do anymore. And he looked at me, and based on the shot list, you give me the shot list, and you're going to request X number of rolls of film. because since it's 36 on that Leica, it's not like you've got a card with 1,000 opportunities. I said, and so then we're going to pretend you're shooting film. So then you're going to give me the shot list, and you're going to request a certain number of rolls of film to complete the assignment for the alien in a Need to See Historia. And I will determine, based on the shot list, exactly how many rolls I'll give you. And I said, oh, and by the way, you know, when I did all those day in the life books, we used to do this assignment in 24 hours. And that I could see the color starting to drain. And I said, and I want to see the cameras taped up. And I would suggest you shoot it in black and white. We don't want any work on exposure and composition so much more easily. And then again, it gave me the shot list, and he asked for 10 rolls of film. And I got back to him and I said, I think you need to, I want to know more about such and such. But I'll tell you what, you want 10 rolls. How's this? I'm going to give you 5. I wouldn't shoot all of it because there may be some reshoot involved. And he goes to school, goes up to the grad school, and the camera is taped over, and he goes to the head of the photo department who's brought me there, and he is just panic-stricken. And he goes, she made me tape over the back of the camera. She's made me blah, 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 blah. And he's terrified. And John finds this very funny, and he's laughing and thinking, damn, I'm so glad I hired her. Right? And he said, you'll just stick with her and do what she tells you. You'll be happy. In the long run, you'll be happy. And I go in the next day to see some students, and John comes up to me and he goes, laughing. And he says, and he was with SEPA, this guy. It's a shooter, too. He says to me, he's so terrified. Oh, it's so fantastic. You can't believe you made a tape over the back of the camera. He's blah, 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 blah. And he's laughing and carrying on. Brilliant. It's brilliant. I said, do you know why you're laughing so much, John? He goes, why? I said, because I'm not doing it to you. You know, if you came to me, I would tape over the back of your camera. And he goes, this is true. This is why I am laughing, because you're doing it. But that is important. And I know, don't you dare. And then one of the kids, you know, I was, after you send me more, so the last time, just end of the semester, she sends me like 3,000 pictures. I'm not kidding. And I see this and I think, and she's going to come down here to my house. Sometimes I let them come here. They love that. And of course, they walk in and see the autographed John Lennon Yoko Ono picture from Annie that says, with all my love. And that's kind of startling. But I have wall-to-ceiling photo books really here. And sometimes I'll pull something out that they could, for composition purposes, it might be a fashion photographer. It doesn't matter because it's about lighting and composition. It doesn't, you know, they'll learn a lot. Now, like, you know, look at Irving Penn, right? Hello. So anyway, this young woman who I've worked with a lot, and I can tell the difference every week. They get better and better because they come and see me at the same time every week. And it's by appointment only and their decision to do it. So anyway, she sends me 3,000 pictures and she's coming over and she sends me a little, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And she sends me a thing going, I know I overshot. I'm really sorry, but I just couldn't help it. And I just want you to see everything. Maybe I did too much. I don't know, but you know, it's sort of funny. She goes, it's kind of funny. And I think, yeah, that's gonna be funny when you walk in my door. I'm looking forward to that. So, you're a sweet girl, sweet. But I mean, I had her once she got all red faced. And I said, there's no crying, by the way. Adults, there's no crying. If you can't take it, then you don't come here because I'm going to be brutally frank. And you are going to listen because you know I'm right. That's what Ivan still says to me from a couple. He sends me something and I go, no, this one. He goes, oh, that's right. You're always right. I said, yes, that's the whole point. So this little girl walks in. She's so sweet. I really adore her. I'm going to work with her next semester. She comes in and I said, oh, I'm so glad you're here. Why don't you come in? I've made some tea. Why don't we have some tea? Why don't you sit down? Sit right down. I see. Well, you know, I was formulating a little thing to send you. And actually, I was thinking, how do I explain to you that sending me 3,000 pictures is anything but funny? I fail to see the humor in that at all. What part of that was amusing? Really, what part was amusing? Oh, and by the way, I've gone through all 3,000 quickly but decisively. And would you like to see the 15 that I think are good? And her face is just beet red, and she's Irish, so I get it. I said, I can see that the next thing that's going to happen is your eyes are going to fill up with tears, and that's because, not because of me, but because you're embarrassed. And because why are you embarrassed? Because you know you screwed up. And now, but this is one of those wonderful lessons, isn't it? This is what you learned from a mistake. This was a big mistake, but not a fatal one. It's not fatal, but what's going to happen in the future? She goes, I'm never going to do that. Not only that, what else is going to happen in the future? I'm going to look before I push the button. I said, yeah, and I tell them all the time, you know what? I'm looking at this box, right? When you've got a camera up, you are walking around with a picture frame, right? It's a picture frame. Now, it could be a horizontal picture frame, or you can turn it this way, but that's what it is. So you want to make sure that everything that's within this picture frame works. What are the diagonals? What are the lines? What is the composition? Unfortunately, if you're shooting digital, the damn camera, unless it's a Leica that goes like this, it focuses in the center. And I said, you know, life is not center focus. You'll have to figure out around that. And you use the auto to tell you the light, the exposure. I said, someday, in a very important moment, that will go out. And you will have never figured out how to read light with your eye. So I think we'll have to shut that off too. And then you'll learn. So she looked at me and she goes, I'll never do that. And I said, what's the part you're never really going to do? She goes, I'll never shoot that much ever again because I missed so much. And I said, you did. And that is panic. That's from panic and fear. Do that because you're fearful that you're not there, you're not present, you're terrified, there's so much going on. And instead of picking one piece of a parade, let's say, what's the one thing that's happening here? And who should I be focusing on? And then just stick with that person. And then you can do some overall parade stuff. But dear Lord. So she's, over the summer, she had an amazing, they all have to do internships between their second semester. So I have, some of my students are in Joburg, some are here, some are there. And she had an amazing assignment with a newspaper, and it was on this area called the Hub up in the Bronx, which is a tough area for drug addicts, and she shot it. And it was concise, on the money. She sent me her choices, and she sent me the full, pretty much the full take. She did this story. One of the people she encountered was this woman, who's a longtime drug addict, and she just nailed it. She nailed it, and she did not make excess pictures. And I thought that was after the end, I was away all of June and she's been working, but that was after I, gave her a really direct, and I'm telling you, I look at that and I'm so pleased because they can listen, learn. And that's all you ever want. You want someone who's a quick learner because we're all going to make screw ups. But you want someone who's going to look at that and think, I don't need to do that again.
It sounds like, and this might be a terrible way to look at things in some journalism schools, but it's almost like you're talking about photojournalism as if it's some type of art.
Well, I think I think not like art photography, but I think there is to being a good photographer, because that it's made up of, see, what I'm never going to teach anybody technical stuff. Okay. I mean, they come to me all my life. I'm sure I might have even said it to you. Do not ask me what lens to use. I could care less. And if I knew, I'd go out and shoot the picture. What I want to talk to you about is what I want to feel from the images. what I think this story is about, what my little intuition tells me, and you need to do some research. Now when I send these kids out, I say, you need to go out now, because you have to have all these skills. They're taking video now. You have to go out with the mentality of a reporter and the eye of a photographer. The mentality of a reporter is to find out everything you can that's going on, all of that stuff, as if you were going to write it. But what you're going to do is photograph those nuances. And the whole time, you've got a picture frame. So you want to make sure you're not just wildly doing this, because you want to be able to think about what's in that frame. Well, how do I compose this, particularly as a student right now? Don't worry about getting the whole thing. Worry about finding a way to look at the composition that's in the frame and decide at the point you should take the picture. And for a while, you might want to just walk around with the camera. If you're sometimes they get very freaked if they're, a big demonstration, and then they're overwhelmed by all the input. And I always say, don't shoot right away, because in a demonstration, there's always going to be stuff going on. Walk around with the camera and do a 180, do a 360, so you can see everything that's behind you, as well as what you initially see in front of you. Take it in, chew on it, digest it, and then decide now you've looked at everything. Now you can begin to think about, where is the action? Who seems to be leading this? Who are the followers? What's the detail? Is it the snowman with the Bernie buttons all over it, right? That's different. That's the accent picture. This is why you walk around with a picture frame. And then I said, and then when it's a portrait, do remember you can hang verticals on your wall. I said, but this is a great way to teach students to think in terms of what's in the frame. And when you can do that enough, it becomes automatic. I mean, when you look at great photography, and I sometimes will make them, I had a wonderful Russian girl who was here first semester, and I knew she had loved Deborah Turbeville just because of talking to her and getting to know her and everything else. So I turned her on to Deborah Turbeville's pictures. Why? Deborah Turbeville knew shape. Why did she know shape? Because Marvin Israel, who she first worked with, made her shoot in a studio with a triangle, a cube, a rectangle, and a circle made out of styrofoam. And he made her arrange them and light them as from a certain side. Then move the light around so she could see how the shadows fell. Okay, rearrange them now. Take the same thing and go all the way around as you like. Why? Then she understood shape, and she understood shadow. If you look at Deborah Turbeville's fashion pictures, and she had her own style, uniqueness, right? You look at those, you can find triangles and circles and rectangles, and it's innate, right? So that's how Marvin taught her. He used to teach, this is how he taught Ruth Ansell, I understand, and Bea Feitler, who wanted to be art directors. He gave them scissors and paper, and they had to cut the paper like they were going to write.
So I don't know if you realize it completely or not, or even thought about it, but you're kind of a rare bird. This doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, I know.
Have these relationships anymore.
Heartbreak.
So let me just give you like three names: Annie Leibovitz, Jim Knockway, and Peter Turnley.
Okay.
Did you make them better photographers?
Well, I didn't get to work with Knockway enough, so it's not fair to do that, because by the time I was at Newsweek and stuff, he had done the contract with Time. So I wasn't allowed to work with him. But Turnley, yes. Annie, I think so. And Arthur, yeah, I think Arthur would tell you I did. I helped some of the staff guys who were Newsweek who had not been, some I washed my hands up right away because I knew it was a losing thing. But others I didn't. And I know it had an impact. Here's what I would tell you. Annie taught me as much as I taught her. And it was a crazy time. And we were both, our behavior was not great. But she called me Choo Choo because my trains ran on time and hers never did. But I know that I did have an impact on her. I know I did because even as much as I was off the rails, she was further off the rails. And I was with her on certain things. And I pushed her in certain ways. And we developed concepts together that were fun and that worked, ideas for like Linda Ronstadt and the red underwear and, all of that kind of stuff, which was great. Dolly Parton, we were going to do Dolly Parton, and I said, I think her chest is bigger than Arnold's. So Arnold became a prop. True. And he couldn't, it takes Dolly a long time to become Dolly. So it was like 5 hours of hair and makeup, and Arnold was getting, Arnold was being Arnold, and he was, hadn't made any big movies or anything. The gropinator is the correct term. And so he misbehaved a little bit. And, Annie and I had it worked out that sometimes that I could be the bad cop. And she would then look so wonderful. So I kind of was, and I basically told him that he was a prop and that he should just sit down and be quiet. And that it was all about Dolly. And then when it was time, he could come out and be, I'm sure, wonderful. But, read a book, something. But Annie was a huge influence in my life. I really mean it, that I learned a lot about nuance in photography from her. That thing that Gordon started to teach me about looking for her sense of composition. Well, Annie wanted to be a painter. This is the important thing. When she went to the Art Institute in San Francisco, it was to be a painter. If you looked at her bookcases, it was filled with as many books on painting. And many of her pictures have a real classic art reference, painter's reference. So her brain was always thinking. And then she had, she kind of was, Bea Feitler came into her life, which was really important as a designer. And Bea died way too young. And then, of course, there's the Susan Sontag part of her life, which was really excellent because it made her more intellectual, right? I think she would agree to all of those things. But for me, at that time that we were together, which was the mid-'70s, in a wild west, what was it was a nice give and take. And it was very crucial at that time because it was every one of these situations has been a stepping stone. Epworth was important. Teachers and trained an amateur and a pro. And Larry Brose, when I would have opportunity to be with him, he'd come in twice a year, and I'd sit with him as he went through the rejects. And Ralph Morris, who taught me everything about the astronauts and how to run a show and all of that, and was so wonderful and sweet and charming. Each of those experiences, and then Avedon was a wonderful experience to be around someone that fit, that professional, who had a way to feel so comfortable, and how he handled interpersonal relationships it was really a great lesson. And then that led to when I got to New York Magazine, working with Hero and working with, I knew just who to hire if I wanted a well-dressed assassin in certain situations. I'd hire Harry Benson. He was terrific. And I sent him to Donald Trump in the 80s. And he said, could you find out if the toilet's cold? This was when he was married to Ivanka. Just tell me that part. And, there were certain things that was great. I found Andy Levin. He'll tell you that. I gave him his first work. And he was had wonderful rough edge about him that was appropriate for certain stories. I gave Herb Ritz his first book. When I was when I left, I was brought to the New York Times after Rolling Stone. I was brought to the New York Times to maybe be the picture editor there. And I was trying out, and John Dernier kept calling me on the phone. He by that time was at Look, 1979-ish. And he would call every day during that because he'd worked at the Times, and he would just he was now running the Rebirth of Look magazine, and I'm at the Times magazine, and the phone would ring and it would be Jarecke, who I knew really well from way back when I was a kid in life. He was running Time, and he says to me, I go, hello. Hi, it's Jarecke. Hey, how you doing? He goes, you hate the color of the walls there. I go, it was the old film. And I look around, I go, dang, he's right. And every day he called with one more thing. And finally at the end, he said, I'll buy you a better stereo system than Jan Winter ever gave you. And I'm like, okay. And he, Eliane Lafont was the picture editor, and I was going to come and work under her, which was delicious, fine. And I could have the whole back.
Eliane Lafont later went on to run the U.S. offices of Sigma.
Well, she had already been doing that because I knew her from then, and this was because it was run by DeMarquette. Basically, was running. He did the Rebirth, and of course he was French. Everybody in there was French. Everybody spoke French, but that's where I met Patricia Bradbury. She was the only person in the art department who spoke English. And of course, she designed it. We worked together on everything. And we became fast friends and still are. So, but Eliane hired me, and she said, Sherry, here's the deal. You do the back of the book. You do all those Hollywood people, you do all of that. It's all going to be fine. You're going to have a wonderful time. And I will not, you just do it. So I'm like, okay. So I say okay to John, and I say, okay, I'll do it. When do I report? And he goes, Monday. So I went and quit at the Times, and I think it was Ed Klein. Anyway, Ed Klein says, nobody leaves the Times. I said, what? And he said, and Look magazine, it's going to fold, but nobody leaves the Times. And being the arrogant person I was on those days, I said, really? I'm the first person to do that? Damn, that's fantastic. I love being the first at things. Woo-woo. Yeah, but you know what? And it's going to be so much more fun. And I had been working with Carrie Donovan doing fashion, and she loved me, and art director loved me, but they got it. So I went over there. That's how, so I go to Look, and I'm all these things. And one of the people who comes to in the very beginning is a young guy from California named Herb Ritz. And I look at and he had been photographing his neighbor, Steve McQueen. He's lived in that world. It was in the acrylics or whatever, and he brought me an acrylic salt and pepper shakers. And I thought, well, that's not too expensive a gift. I can accept that. But his work was wonderful, and I started to give him assignments, and he loved it. And and we became great friends from that. And I had him, work for me in a lot of situations, and he was wonderful. So, you see talent, and there was a gentleness about him. And I thought, he's going to be so successful out there in Hollywood because he's so smooth and so gentle and so invisible. And yet he's going to get, I could tell from the pictures he made from it, they were fantastic. So, and he had Lawrence Welk's old Woody with the bubbles on the back. So, but so you meet these people, and then Andy was somebody that I found there, and he was. But
you knew these guys. You knew them as well as you possibly could, and
yes, eventually, but not initially, not necessarily initially. It's a learning process. When I gave Peter Turnley his contract, I had not yet met him. I took this at Jimmy Colton's word because I trusted Jimmy Colton. And also, all those guys wanted this job, and they loved Kenny when he was removed and retired early. And all those guys who were working there thought it had always been that way. There was a progression. You got this spot, then you did this spot, and then when the picture editor spot opened, you would get that. So here they go outside. This is at Newsweek. They go outside, and they bring a woman who hasn't done news, right? Who's got all these other, that's what they want. They wanted someone who could help with covers and keep the back of the book looking. News takes care of itself in a certain way, and they're right. And I already knew the guys who ran Black Star and all of that from doing New York and etc. So I needed to make the people who had been passed over realize that I appreciated their gift. And that's what I said to Jimmy. I asked him, and he told me who he'd been working with that was really good. If Nakwe hadn't signed the contract with Time, I was going to give him a contract. But that's how I met Peter, by giving him the contract. And only afterwards did we actually get into some serious conversations and spend time with each other and begin to give him the kind of work that he could do. And same with Andy Hernandez. And when I initially hired all of them, I basically did it on Jimmy's say-so because I trusted him and I thought he was brilliant. And
so that the word trust is important, because I'm talking to, you know, I'm getting you to talk about mentorship and developing talent and this type of thing. And the relationships that start with photo editors today are based on, in my opinion, getting a photographer to sign a contract that's not in their best interest.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And they don't, first of all, the picture editors have not gone through the training I did. So they don't know what it is to, you know, really learn how to look at photographs, and they never grew up in film, so they don't know the difficulty of it. They never grew up in film, so they don't know that the photographers never saw their work. Most who were under fire, and they had to send it in, and they don't have an appreciation for what it takes to go out on an assignment. I know that because that was one of the things they had me do. I would go along. I was the grunt. I would carry this bag. I would do what I was told, but I could see how tough it could be to make a story come to life. And I could see all the obstacles that existed. And I, therefore, you know, and I was always rooting for the photographer, right? Because I was with them. I wanted it to be successful. So this is not in existence anymore. That kind of apprenticeship does not exist. So why? They're not being paid that much money, and they're being hired to do what they're told. And so they're never going to defend photographer. Rarely would you find one of those new people willing to stand up to the boss and say, you're wrong. You can't, that's the absolute right choice. If you were to talk to Rick Smith, he would tell you, damn, she never stopped, ever. I mean, he tells funny stories, but that was my job. And I didn't.
Well, that's what I'm getting. Your job was to build talent, protect talent, get the most out of talent, and get those images then into the pages of a magazine.
That's right. And also it was at times to discipline the talent. I mean, there are times when you know, a verbal is important. So because it's required, because they weren't paying attention, because they were getting lazy, because whatever. Or it could also have been my fault in the sense that I sent the wrong person. You know, being a great photo editor or a good photo editor is like being a Yenta, being half Jewish, I will tell you. It's a matchmaker. It's a marriage. You're making a marriage. It's a short marriage between subject and photographer, but it's trying to figure out, it's a blind date that you really want to have go well. and if you know the photographer and you've spent time knowing and learning about them and looking at their work, you hopefully have an intuition about, and you've read the copy and you've thought about the subject, and I always trusted my instinct. I learned that early. My instincts about a story are damn good. And then you think, well, where's that marriage? What, not just the quality of their work, but that thing about them. And who am I going to send with Nick Pileggi? I'm going to send Andy. They're the same cut from the same cloth. Right? He's tough. He's a New York guy. So is Nicky. Nicky's wonderful, but he loved working with guys like Levin, and when he was at New York, because he had it together. You know, Hamill always wanted to work with his brother. I tried to break that up a little bit. But, and I would give his brother other work. But I wanted to put teams together that complemented each other and that would push each other.
So I want to wrap it up for today, but I want to talk again soon.
Okay.
But can you recommend a book that every photographer should own, or everybody interested in photography should own?
Well, the first thing I make all of my students do is look at that Cartier-Bresson, I think it's 14, 17-minute thing that was done in 1974, and is a collaborative effort between ICP and Scholastic magazine, okay? And it is his philosophy. It's brilliant. And with it are his pictures. And he's talking in the background. There's so much that he says in there. It's so brilliant that that's the first thing I ask people to look at. In terms of the book, it depends on the kind of shooter they are. That's why the one wonderful young Russian girl, I knew it was Deborah Tuberville. So I cannot give you an exact book, but I would say, and once I look at their work, like this one young man, he wanted to see Choose Me, the book Arthur and I did. And so I let him borrow that. They can come here and have a lending library, and they can look at books and they can borrow one. I mean, there's Phil Stern's book on Sinatra. That's an extraordinary book that a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah, that's a great one. I don't have that one on this bookshelf. I'm gonna look for Artie's book.
Artie's book I've got here. I would also say one of my favorite Salgado books is one which was done in Central America, the peasants. I'll have to think of the exact name. It's a brilliant little book. It's not giant. It's really terrific. And if you want, when we talk the next time, I can bring I think Kudelka's book on gypsies is fantastic.
Yeah, that's a classic. That's a
reason. But there are fashion books that I think are really worth looking at. I have, if you want, then we talk. How about this? I'll have books here. Fair enough?
That's great. I'll pull Choose Me out. Maybe I'll get my daughter to find it on the bookcase behind me. Can you find that? I
see her.
Choose Me. It's such a good book. It's so, yeah. I mean, and it like you said, it broke new ground as far as campaign photography goes.
Totally. And then everybody tried to copy it. But it was, this is an idea. I didn't have to always have the good idea. I had to be able to, like Arthur always knew that he could come to me with an idea, and I would say, great, go. And later I would tell downstairs what I was doing. And because of the deal Mr. Smith made with me, and to this day we are great friends, Rick. Whatever. It was fun. Shall I show you my coronation picture? You want to see that?
Do you have it handy?
Yeah, I have it right here. You see that?
Oh, wow. Look, bring it down a little bit. That's wonderful.
You see? I wore a crown. I put a crown of roses in my hair. And that's Rick at the top of the week, telling everybody how excited he was. Mrs. Graham even came.
That's lovely, Karen. We've just really, we barely scraped the surface. We could talk. I wanted to talk about, well,
tell me. I know you've run out of time. I talk too much is the problem.
No, not at all.
I've been lucky. Kenny, I've lived an amazing life. I really have. I know everybody tells me I have to write a book. I keep trying, but I'm not. I do this well. This I can do. I can't do this. I can't type. I have to I think I need a tape recorder. Or someone like you to interview me. We put it on tape. Because you ask really good questions. And then I can just spill it out. That's what I tell my students. I said, bring a notebook because I never say it anyway. And they do. They do. We can get into the, I'm telling you, this is the greatest thing, this job I have now, this opportunity. It's not a job, it's a gift. I'm mentoring, I'm called a this is amusing, a non-teaching adjunct. It's sort of funny since I'm always teaching. And it's a one-on-one deal. It's a coach. They haven't actually had that before in this department of photography. And so students contact me, and then we make an appointment. And what's happened is after the first appointment, they book that time for the rest of the semester. It's a bit like being a therapist.
Well, your students, I hope they know how lucky they are to have you as a mentor. And,
they do. And they're wonderful. And I'm lucky to have them, because each is so uniquely different than the other, which is why it works on a one-on-one. And I can do something that the teachers can't, and it's not their fault. They have 20 kids in the class. They've got a syllabus. They've got to do this. But I get to actually, see what they're doing on it and help them with the edit, teach them what they might have missed, and sometimes contradict the teacher, but that's okay. And that's why we do it behind closed doors. And my thing is to, you learn all the technical skills because you need them. But what you need to develop, it's like a graph. Here you better have all the technical skills, right? You better learn how to do that. But at the same time, on a parallel line, you better be developing your own personal vision and view of the world. What's your humor? Because you can be as technical as you want and your pictures will be boring. If your pictures are interesting and you don't understand the technical part of it, you'll never achieve what you want. But you learn the technique and then you spend the time developing your eye. I have one last thing. Have you ever seen that video that I'm telling you about, Cartier-Bresson?
You've talked to me about it before, and I don't know that I'll find a link for it, and I'll
it's right on YouTube. It's on YouTube, and it's my other favorite line, which I think you'll appreciate. Then I'll hang up. He talks about how he never thought he was a journalist, and he says to Bob Capa, right? They found it with Rogers and the other guy. So he says in that accent of his, he goes, "I am not a journalist." He goes, "I am a surrealist." He says, Capa says, "Well, don't tell them that. Tell them you're a journalist and then just shoot like a surrealist." Which, of course, when you look at his stuff, that's what he kind of does. I am not a journalist. I'm a surrealist. Well, don't tell them that. It's so perfect. It's like an actor. Do you ice skate? Oh, Sonia, honey. I ice skate. I can fly. They'll say anything to get the part. Well, the same thing is true with photographers, if you think about it. Oh, I use that. Oh, no, I know how to use that. Yeah, fine. Then you go home and you learn really fast how to use that telephoto. Right? Oh, I got that covered.
Thank you, Karen. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Kenny. I had such fun. It was so nice. Thank you for thinking of me. I appreciate it.
I just want you to know how well loved you are and how well appreciated you are, and thank you for spending this time with me today. And
make me want to cry. Thank you.
Oh, I'm not going to make you cry. I've done that plenty in the past, just because we're both emotional people. Not afraid to cry in front of you.
Well, guess what? 2 of my favorite pictures on my wall were taken by you. Did you know that? Over my
just 2? What?
Well, it's only 2 you gave me. How's that for a recovery? No, it's the one taken that I love so much from Sports Illustrated. The one in the Sweat Lodge. That was a hell of a shot. And getting that was great. And I know I gave you great instruction on that.
I think you like that because I was completely naked when I shot that.
Yes, I love that, and that's so hot. But I want to do that story. Don't start shooting right away. Leave your camera out there. Let them get to know you, and let them take your picture. And you'll be there the next day, so no one captured your soul. And then the one that I brought, which is the kid under the boardwalk with the balloon. I love that. Yeah. I love that picture. So there you go.
Well, now you've humbled me. So I love you, and
I love you right back.
talk soon.
Yes.
Okay.
Love to the family.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. I'll send my children to you for mentorship soon.
Oh yeah, Salgado sent me his son, Giuliano. Well,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, was he 17? Oh, he sent it to me at Sports Illustrated and said, just beat him all the time. And I said, this is off the record. I said, what can I teach him? I'm just going to be able to teach him how to say fuck 100 different times. And he goes, this is a good lesson.
Okay. Well, love you.
Love you.
We'll,
I'm going to stop talking.
thanks for watching. We'll be back with a new episode soon. Really appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.